The world thought all might was the symbol of peace. They were wrong. Izuku Midoriya stands over a shattered mountain range, knuckles unscratched. The air still trembles from his galaxy impact. An old man's voice echoes. "Brat, you haven't even scratched the surface." This is how a quirkless boy became something that makes gods tremble.
Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you've got an idea for the next part or a brand new what if you want to see, drop it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's jump straight into the story.
The doctor's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Izuku Midoriya, age 4, sat stone-faced on the examination table as his mother's sobs filled the small office. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, but your son is quirkless." The extra joint in his pinky toe confirms it. While his mother wept, young Izuku merely clenched his small fists until his knuckles turned white. Unlike other children his age, he didn't cry. Instead, a silent determination took root in his heart. Where others might see limitation, Izuku saw only a challenge to overcome. "Mom," he said quietly as they walked home, his face set with resolution beyond his years, "I don't need a quirk to be a hero." That evening, while Inko Midoriya drowned her sorrows in tea and guilt, Izuku began what would become a decade-long journey. In his room, surrounded by All Might posters and memorabilia, he dropped to the floor and struggled through his first push-up. Then another, and another. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, months to years. By age 7, Izuku was running 5 kilometers before school. By 10, he could do 200 push-ups without stopping. At 12, he was studying combat manuals and practicing techniques against a homemade dummy in the local park. The other children, including his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo, watched with a mixture of confusion and reluctant respect. "Oi, Deku," Bakugo called out one afternoon, approaching the sweat-drenched boy. "You're still quirkless, you know that, right? No amount of push-ups is going to change that." Izuku paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I know, Kachan, but I'll get stronger anyway." Something in his tone made Bakugo pause. The explosive boy had expected tears or excuses, not this quiet confidence. He scoffed and walked away, but the interaction left him unsettled. This wasn't the Deku who he was used to pushing around. By 14, Izuku's training had intensified to near inhuman levels. 6 hours daily without fail, rain or shine. His body had become lean, hardened muscle, but he pushed it beyond what even the most dedicated athlete would consider reasonable. His goal to become strong enough to stand alongside heroes without a quirk drove him beyond normal human limitations. Then came the day everything changed. The rain fell in sheets, drenching Midoriya as he completed his 15th kilometer. His muscles screamed, but he pushed on, ignoring the warning signs his body was sending. Lightning cracked overhead as he dropped to do his 500th push-up. 327. His arms trembled. 362. His vision blurred. 415. Something in his chest didn't feel right. 449. The world tilted sideways. Izuku collapsed face first into the mud. His heart hammered erratically in his chest, and each breath came as a painful rasp. 10 years of pushing his body beyond its limits had finally caught up with him. As consciousness faded, his last thought wasn't of fear, but frustration. He still wasn't strong enough. Then darkness. Izuku opened his eyes to find himself in a vast, white void. No ground, no sky, just endless white stretching in all directions. He stood, surprised to find his body felt weightless, the pain completely gone. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." The voice came from behind him. Izuku turned to face a towering, broad-shouldered old man with white hair and a battle-scarred face. Despite his age, the man radiated power unlike anything Izuku had ever felt. Raw, primal strength that seemed to distort the very space around him. Who are you?" Izuku asked. The old man grinned, revealing a row of perfect teeth. "Names aren't important here. What matters is what you've been doing, pushing yourself beyond what should be possible for someone with no power." "I want to be a hero," Izuku said simply, standing straighter, even without a quirk. The old man laughed, a booming sound that somehow filled the endless void. "A hero? Eh?" even with nothing to your name but determination and fists? Yes. The old man's expression shifted, his eyes boring into Izuku with an intensity that made the boy feel like his very soul was being examined. You remind me of someone I knew long ago, the old man said, his voice suddenly serious. Someone who started with nothing but refused to let that define him. He stepped forward, and Izuku realized just how massive the man truly was, towering over him like a mountain of muscle. Listen carefully, kid. You've got power, but you've got a warrior's soul. I've been watching you. 10 years of training, never giving up, never making excuses. That kind of spirit deserves a reward. The old man raised his hand, his palm beginning to glow with a strange blue-black energy. I've lived my life, fought my battles. My time is long past. But your journey is just beginning. What are you? My power, my techniques, my experience. I'm giving them to you. The old man's eyes gleamed with something Izuku couldn't identify. Use them well. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Stand against evil, no matter how powerful. That's what it means to be a true hero. Before Izuku could respond, the old man pressed his glowing palm against the boy's chest. Searing pain exploded through Izuku's body, followed by a rush of something. Knowledge, power, memories, fragmentary and confusing. Battles against impossible foes, mountains shattered by bare fists, oceans parted by the force of a single punch. Izuku screamed as his body was flooded with power beyond comprehension. The white void shattered around him like glass, and he was falling. His eyes snapped open. He was lying in a hospital bed, his mother asleep in a chair beside him. According to the chart at the foot of his bed, he'd been unconscious for 3 days, severe exhaustion and physical collapse. But something was different. He felt stronger, not just stronger, invincible, as if the limitations of his human body had been rewritten entirely. Experimentally, he clenched his fist. The air around his hand seemed to ripple like heat waves rising from asphalt. When he relaxed his fingers, he heard a sound like distant thunder. Whatever had happened in that white void was real. The old man, the power transfer, all of it. Somehow, Izuku Midoriya had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The next 10 months passed in a blur of discovery and training. Izuku quickly realized that controlling his new abilities was just as challenging as developing them had been. The first time he tried a punch with his full strength, he created a shockwave that shattered the windows of an abandoned warehouse. The first time he tried to run at full speed, he broke the sound barrier and terrified half the neighborhood. Within his mind, fragments of knowledge surfaced at odd moments, techniques with strange names. Geppo, Soru, Tekai, Shigan, Rankyaku, Kamiye, and something else, something more fundamental and powerful, Haki. The old man's knowledge came in fragments, muscle memory more than conscious understanding. Izuku didn't know who the white-haired warrior had been, only that he had been someone of extraordinary power and unshakable principles. His mother noticed the change in him immediately, not just his rapidly developing physique, but the new confidence in his bearing, the intensity in his eyes. She worried, but she had always supported his dream, even when it seemed impossible. Now, as she watched him casually lift the refrigerator with one hand to retrieve a dropped spoon, that dream suddenly seemed very possible indeed. Even Bakugo noticed the difference. During their final year of middle school, the explosive boy watched with narrowed eyes as Izuku effortlessly dominated physical education classes. When a stray baseball threatened to hit a younger student during recess, Izuku moved with blinding speed, snatching it from the air with casual ease. "What the hell happened to you, Deku?" Bakugo demanded one day, cornering Izuku after school. "You're supposed to be quirkless." Izuku met his childhood friend's gaze steadily. "I am quirkless, Kachan. I just got stronger." "Bullshit. Nobody gets that strong from push-ups." Izuku shrugged. "Believe what you want. I'm taking the UA entrance exam just like you." Bakugo's hands sparked with small explosions. "You think you can compete with me now? Fine. Show me at UA, if you even get in." As Izuku walked away, he felt something strange, Bakugo's emotions. Anger, confusion, but underneath it all, respect. Somehow he could sense it, like a color or scent unique to each person he encountered. Another gift from the mysterious old man, he supposed. By the time the UA entrance exam arrived, Izuku had gained sufficient control over his abilities to avoid causing accidental destruction. What he couldn't control was the aura of power that seemed to radiate from him, a presence that made others instinctively step aside when he walked through a crowd. As he stood before the massive gates of UA High School, Izuku took a deep breath. This was it, the first step toward becoming the hero he had always dreamed of being. "Move aside, Deku," came a familiar voice. Bakugo strode past, his expression set in determination. "Don't get in my way," Izuku smiled. "Wouldn't dream of it, Kachan. Give it your all." Before Bakugo could respond, a cheerful voice called out from behind them. "Excuse me, coming through." A round-faced girl with rosy cheeks hurried past, nearly tripping on an uneven paving stone. Without thinking, Izuku moved. One moment he was standing still, the next he was beside her, his hand gently steadying her elbow. "Careful," he said with a smile. The girl's eyes widened. "Wow, that was so fast! Thanks for the save." She beamed at him. "I'm Ochako Uraraka. Are you taking the hero course exam too?" "Izuku Midoriya." "And yes, I am." "Well, good luck. Let's both do our best." As she hurried off, Izuku noticed Bakugo watching him with a strange expression. "What?" Izuku asked. Bakugo just shook his head. "Nothing. Just wondering when you got so smooth with girls." He turned away. "See you inside. Try not to embarrass yourself." The practical portion of the entrance exam was straightforward. Destroy robot villains to earn points. As Present Mike explained the rules, Izuku felt a strange calm settle over him. This was what he had been preparing for all these years. What the mysterious old man had given him power to achieve. When the gates opened and the other examinees rushed forward, Izuku simply walked. Then, when he had enough space, he bent his knees slightly and pushed off. The ground beneath his feet cracked as he launched himself forward, moving so fast he became a green blur. The first robot he encountered, a one-pointer, barely had time to register his presence before Izuku's fist connected with its center mass. The machine didn't just break, it exploded, scattering parts in every direction. Izuku didn't even pause. He was already moving toward the next target. His senses somehow expanded, allowing him to perceive the locations of robots throughout the testing ground. Witnesses would later describe it as watching a force of nature. The green-haired boy tore through the exam area like a hurricane, leaving destroyed robots in his wake. A three-pointer attempted to attack from behind. Without looking, Izuku kicked backward, his leg moving so fast it created a visible blade of compressed air that sliced the machine in half. In the observation room, the UA, faculty watched in stunned silence. "What exactly is this young man's quirk?" asked Cementos. "According to his registration," Midnight replied, checking her tablet, "he's quirkless." Present Mike's jaw dropped. "No way. Look at him move. That's got to be some kind of super strength quirk, or maybe a speed type." All Might, present in his skeletal true form, leaned forward with interest. "Remarkable. I've never seen anything quite like it." On the monitors, Izuku continued his rampage. By the 5-minute mark, he had accumulated over 60 villain points. Then came the zero-pointer, a massive robot the size of a building designed not to be fought but avoided. As the behemoth appeared, crushing buildings and causing examinees to flee, Izuku noticed Uraraka trapped beneath some debris, directly in its path. Without hesitation, he changed direction, sprinting toward the danger rather than away from it. In the observation room, All Might smiled. "Now, young man, show us what kind of hero you'll be." Izuku reached Uraraka in an instant, effortlessly lifting the concrete slab pinning her down. "Can you move?" he asked. "My ankle," she winced. "I think it's sprained." The zero-pointer loomed above them, its massive foot about to come down directly overhead. Izuku gently set Uraraka aside, then turned to face the mechanical monstrosity. Something stirred in his memory, a fragment from the old man. The sensation of hardening his fist with invisible armor, channeling his willpower into a physical force. Izuku drew back his arm, fist clenched. To the observers, his arm seemed to take on a faint black sheen, though it might have been a trick of the light. Then, he punched upward. The air itself seemed to shatter. A visible shockwave erupted from his fist, traveling upward to meet the descending robot. When it connected, the zero-pointer didn't just stop. Its entire body crumpled inward from the point of impact, as if struck by an invisible meteor. Metal shrieked and tore, and the colossal machine toppled backward, crashing to the ground in a heap of twisted metal and sparking circuitry. Silence fell across the exam area. Every examinee, every observer in the control room, stared in disbelief. Izuku simply turned, scooped Uraraka into his arms, and carried her to safety as casually as if he were carrying groceries. What was that? She asked, her eyes wide with awe. Izuku smiled, though there was a hint of confusion in his own eyes. Just a punch. When the results came a week later, no one was surprised that Izuku Midoriya had placed first in the entrance exam, breaking all previous records. What did surprise many was the notation beside his name, Quirk, unclassified. UA. High school had never before admitted a student whose abilities defied standard quirk classification, but they had also never seen anyone destroy a zero-pointer with a single punch, not even All Might during his own entrance exam decades earlier. Izuku's first day at UA began with a chance encounter. As he approached the imposing building, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, Midoriya, right?" He turned to see Uraraka hurrying toward him, her face bright with excitement. "We made it. I still can't believe it. And you came in first place. That was incredible what you did with the giant robot." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, slightly embarrassed by her enthusiasm. "I just did what anyone would do." "Are you kidding? No one else could have done that? What kind of quirk do you have anyway? Super strength?" Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. "If you're here to make friends, you're in the wrong place." Standing behind them was a disheveled man with long black hair and bloodshot eyes wrapped in a yellow sleeping bag. He fixed them with an unimpressed stare. "This is the hero course, not a social club." "Sorry, sir," Izuku responded immediately, recognizing the man as a pro-hero despite his appearance. "We'll head to class right away." The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he regarded Izuku. At least one of you has some sense. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. And you're wasting time. Everyone's already inside." Class 1A was filled with a diverse group of students, each with their own unique abilities. As Izuku entered alongside Uraraka, all eyes turned to them, or more specifically, to him. His entrance exam performance had already become legendary among the first years. "That's him," he heard someone whisper. "The guy who one-punched the zero-pointer." Bakugo, already seated, merely scowled. "Took you long enough, Deku." Before Izuku could respond, Aizawa entered and immediately announced they would be having a quirk apprehension test. The class followed him to the training grounds where he explained they would be performing standard physical tests, but with permission to use their quirks. "Midoriya," Aizawa called out, "you placed first in the entrance exam. Come demonstrate the ball throw." Izuku stepped forward, aware of the curious stares. As he took the ball, Aizawa's eyes flashed red, his hair rising as he activated his erasure quirk. "Throw it with everything you've got," the teacher instructed. Izuku could feel something trying to suppress his power, but whatever Aizawa was doing had no effect. His abilities weren't a quirk to be erased, they were something else entirely. Without hesitation, he wound up and threw the ball with just a fraction of his strength. The ball disappeared into the sky with a sonic boom. Seconds passed before Aizawa's measuring device finally beeped. 1,743, 6 meters. The class erupted in exclamations of surprise and awe. Aizawa, however, was staring at Izuku with intense suspicion. "Interesting," he said quietly. "My quirk had no effect on you. According to your records, you're quirkless. Care to explain?" The class fell silent, all eyes now fixed on Izuku with renewed interest. "I am quirkless, sir," Izuku responded honestly. "I just trained very hard." "No amount of training gives a quirkless person the ability to throw a ball into the stratosphere," Aizawa countered. "Whatever your ability is, it isn't affected by my erasure. That makes you either exceptionally powerful or exceptionally dangerous, possibly both." The tests continued, with Izuku dominating every category. He could run 100 meters in under a second, creating afterimages as he moved. His grip strength exceeded the limits of the measuring device. For the standing long jump, he cleared the entire sandbox and landed nearly 50 meters away. By the end of the tests, it was clear to everyone that Izuku Midoriya was operating on a completely different level than his classmates. Even Bakugo, who had placed second overall, was visibly frustrated by the gap between them. As they headed back to the classroom, a tall boy with glasses approached Izuku. "Midoriya, I'm Tenya Ida. I must say your performance was extraordinary. If I may ask, how can someone quirkless possess such abilities?" Before Izuku could answer, Bakugo cut in. "He's not quirkless anymore, Four Eyes. He's been hiding his quirk all these years. That's not true, Kachan, Izuku said firmly. I don't have a quirk. I just found a different kind of strength. Bullshit, Bakugo growled, but there was less heat in his words than usual. For all his bluster, even he couldn't deny the evidence of his own eyes. The next day brought the battle trial exercise, where students would be paired up and assigned to play either heroes or villains. All Might himself, resplendent in his Silver Age costume, would be overseeing the training. Young Midoriya, the symbol of peace boomed as he announced the teams. You'll be partnered with young Uraraka as the hero team. You'll be facing the villain team of young Bakugo and young Ida. Izuku's heart raced with excitement. A chance to test his abilities against Bakugo, who had always been the strongest person he knew, and supervised by All Might himself, his childhood hero. As they prepared for the exercise, Uraraka looked nervous. Bakugo seems really intense, especially toward you. Do you two have some kind of history? We grew up together, Izuku explained, stretching his arms. He's always been amazing. Powerful quirk, natural talent, unshakable confidence. I spent years chasing after him. And now? A small smile played at Izuku's lips. Now, I think he's the one doing the chasing. When the exercise began, Izuku and Uraraka entered the building cautiously. Using a technique he'd been practicing, a form of sensory perception, the fragments in his mind called observation haki, Izuku could feel the presence of both Bakugo and Ida within the structure. Bakugo's coming, he warned Uraraka quietly. He's moving fast, heading straight for us. Ida's staying with the weapon on the top floor. How do you know that? She whispered, amazed. Before he could answer, the wall beside them exploded as Bakugo burst through, palms crackling with nitroglycerin sweat. Deku, he roared, launching himself forward with an explosion. Don't you dare look down on me. Izuku pushed Uraraka aside gently. Go for the weapon, he instructed calmly. I'll handle Kachan. As Uraraka hurried away, Izuku turned to face his childhood friend. Bakugo's explosive right hook came fast, faster than most people could track. But to Izuku, it might as well have been moving through water. He sidestepped effortlessly, watching as Bakugo's eyes widened in shock. You've gotten a lot stronger, Kachan, Izuku said sincerely. But so have I. What followed was less a fight than a demonstration. Bakugo unleashed explosion after explosion, each more powerful than the last, but Izuku evaded them all with fluid grace. The fragments of knowledge in his mind called it kamie, making his body flow like paper in the wind. In the observation room, All Might and the students of Class 1A watched in awe. Young Midoriya is remarkable, All Might commented. Such precision, such control. He's not even attacking, observed a red-haired student named Kirishima. He's just dodging everything. Back in the battle building, Bakugo's frustration was reaching its peak. Fight back, damn you, he shouted, his explosions growing more erratic. Stop mocking me. I'm not mocking you, Kachan, Izuku replied calmly. I respect you too much for that. Then, in a move too fast for anyone but All Might to follow, Izuku closed the distance between them. His finger extended, tapping Bakugo lightly on the chest, a technique called Shigan that, at full power, could pierce steel like a bullet. At this reduced strength, it merely knocked the wind from Bakugo's lungs, sending him stumbling backward. What the hell was that? Bakugo gasped, clutching his chest. Just a poke, Izuku said with a small smile. Now let's continue. Show me what you've got, Kachan. Fueled by a mixture of rage and wounded pride, Bakugo launched his most powerful attack, a massive explosion channeled through his grenade-shaped gauntlets. The blast filled the corridor with smoke and debris. When it cleared, Izuku stood unharmed, his arms crossed in front of him. He had used another technique, Tekkai, hardening his muscles to create a defense as strong as iron. In the observation room, the students of Class 1A were speechless. He just took Bakugo's explosion head-on, stammered a student with a tail. What kind of quirk is that? Asked another with earphone jacks dangling from her earlobes. All Might said nothing, but his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Meanwhile, Uraraka had reached the top floor, where Ida was guarding the fake weapon with exaggerated villainous flair. Using her zero-gravity quirk, she managed to float above him and touch the weapon, securing victory for the hero team. Hero team wins, All Might's voice announced over the intercom. Bakugo stood frozen, staring at Izuku with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. You were holding back. We both were, Izuku replied. This was just training, after all. Don't give me that crap. You didn't even break a sweat. Bakugo's fists clenched. When did you get so strong? What happened to you? For a moment, Izuku considered telling him about the White Void, the old man, the strange transfer of power. But how could he explain something he barely understood himself? I just kept pushing forward, he said instead, like I always have. The days that followed saw Izuku adjusting to life at UA, forming friendships with his classmates while continuing to refine his abilities. Though his power clearly set him apart, his humble nature and genuine desire to help others made him approachable. He began offering training tips to classmates who asked, showing them exercises that had helped him develop his base strength. Then came the unforeseen simulation joint incident, an attack that would thrust the students of Class 1A directly into the world of real villains. It began as a standard rescue training exercise. Class 1A, accompanied by Aizawa and 13, arrived at the USJ facility to practice different disaster scenarios. But before the training could begin, a swirling black mist appeared in the center of the facility, disgorging dozens of villains, the self-proclaimed League of Villains. 13. Protect the students, Aizawa commanded, pulling on his capture scarf and goggles as he prepared to engage the intruders. Izuku's enhanced senses immediately picked up on the danger. There was something different about the massive, muscular creature with an exposed brain that stood beside a man covered in disembodied hands. That thing, whatever it was, radiated malice and power unlike anything he had ever felt. Sensei, Izuku said urgently, the bird-like creature down there. It's dangerous. More dangerous than the others. Aizawa glanced at him sharply. How can you tell? I can. Sense it. Izuku struggled to explain the feeling. It's like killing intent, but concentrated. Please be careful. The teacher nodded grimly. Get the students out of here if you can. I'll hold them off. As Aizawa leapt into battle, the black mist villains suddenly materialized before the students, blocking their escape. When 13 attempted to use their black hole quirk, the mist villain, introducing himself as Kurogiri, used his warp gate ability to scatter the students throughout the facility. Izuku found himself transported to the shipwreck zone along with Tsuyu Asui and Minoru Mineta. They surfaced in the artificial lake to find themselves surrounded by aquatic villains. We need to get back to the others, Tsuyu said, her large eyes scanning the situation with remarkable calm. Mineta was less composed. We're going to die. We're just students. We're not going to die, Izuku stated firmly. And we're not just students, we're heroes in training. Using his enhanced strength, Izuku created a whirlpool by stirring the water with his arm, drawing the villains into a tight cluster. Then, with precise timing, he struck the water's surface with his palm, generating a pressure that knocked all the villains unconscious at once. Tsuyu's eyes widened. Midoriya-chan, that was incredible. Thanks, Izuku replied, already scanning the facility with his observation haki. Aizawa-sensei is fighting at the central plaza, but something's wrong. Carrying his classmates, Izuku leapt from the water to a nearby shore, then made his way stealthily toward the central plaza. What they witnessed there chilled them to the bone. Aizawa was pinned beneath the bird-like creature, the one called Nomu by the hand-covered villain, his arms twisted at unnatural angles. That's the creature I sensed, Izuku whispered. It's designed to kill heroes. What do we do? Mineta whimpered. Before Izuku could answer, the hand-covered villain, Shigaraki, noticed them. Oh! Some students escaped Kurogiri's warp? Nomu. Get them. The creature moved with shocking speed, but to Izuku's enhanced perception, it was trackable. As the Nomu lunged for Tsuyu, Izuku intercepted it, his arm hardening with Tekai as he blocked the creature's massive fist. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, cracking the concrete beneath Izuku's feet. But he held firm, much to Shigaraki's visible surprise. What's this? A student standing up to my Nomu? The villain's voice carried a childish curiosity. You should be broken like your teacher. Get Aizawa-sensei and run, Izuku instructed his classmates, never taking his eyes off the Nomu. I'll hold it off. But Midoriya-chan? Go! As Tsuyu and Mineta carefully retrieved their injured teacher, Izuku fully engaged the Nomu. The creature was a physical marvel, incredible strength, speed, and a shock absorption quirk that nullified standard attacks. But Izuku was operating on a different level entirely. Drawing on the old man's techniques, Izuku moved faster than the eye could follow, using Soru to create after-images as he circled the creature. His punches, infused with the beginnings of armament haki, bypassed the creature's shock absorption, striking directly at its internal structure. From the entrance of the USJ, the recently arrived All Might watched in astonishment as a first-year student battled what appeared to be a biological weapon designed specifically to counter him. "Young Midoriya," he murmured, "what are you?" The Nomu roared in frustration as it failed to land a solid hit on Izuku. Shigaraki began scratching his neck anxiously. "This isn't right," the villain muttered. "He's just a kid. Nomu should be crushing him." Izuku, sensing an opening, launched himself into the air using Geppo, the moonwalk technique that allowed him to kick off the very air itself. From above, he descended with devastating force, his fist connecting with the Nomu's exposed brain. The creature staggered, clearly damaged for the first time. Izuku pressed his advantage, delivering a rapid series of Shigan strikes to vital points, followed by a powerful Rankyaku, a kick that generated a blade of compressed air, slicing deep into the Nomu's side. Shigaraki's scratching intensified. "No, no, no, this isn't how it's supposed to go. Nomu was made to kill All Might." As if summoned by the villain's words, a powerful voice boomed across the facility. "Have no fear, for I am here." All Might arrived in a blur of movement, landing beside Izuku with his characteristic smile, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "Young Midoriya, I'm impressed, but please leave this to me now." "All Might," Izuku acknowledged with respect. "Be careful. This thing was designed to counter your abilities. It has shock absorption and super regeneration." The symbol of peace's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed. "Thank you for the information. Now, please see to your classmates' safety." Reluctantly, Izuku backed away, joining Tsuyu and Mineta, who had managed to drag Aizawa to relative safety. As he watched All Might engage the Nomu, he noticed something. The number one hero was not at full strength. There was a hesitation in his movements, a tension in his smile that spoke of hidden strain. When the Nomu grabbed All Might and Kurogiri opened a warp gate beneath them, a trap to bisect the hero, Izuku didn't hesitate. Using Soru, he crossed the distance in an instant, delivering a powerful haki-infused punch to Kurogiri's metal collar, the only solid part of the mist villain's body. The impact sent Kurogiri flying backward, disrupting his warp gate and allowing All Might to break free. "Young Midoriya," All Might called out, "I told you to." "I couldn't stand by and watch," Izuku replied firmly. "Not when I could help." Something passed between them then, a moment of mutual recognition. All Might saw in Izuku not just extraordinary power, but the true spirit of heroism that couldn't be taught or given, only nurtured. Together, they faced the Nomu once more. This time, Izuku matched his movements to All Might's, the two heroes working in perfect synchronization. Where All Might struck with overwhelming force, Izuku followed with precision targeting. Where the Nomu attempted to counter All Might, Izuku was there to disrupt its balance with Rankyaku or Geppo-assisted aerial attacks. "This is impossible," Shigaraki raved, scratching furiously at his neck. "One symbol of peace was bad enough, but now there's a mini version?" The tide turned decisively when Izuku, seeing All Might preparing for a final assault, used his developing observation haki to identify the Nomu's weakest point. All Might. Hit it right at the base of the skull where the brain connects. The symbol of peace nodded, channeling every ounce of his remaining power into a devastating punch precisely where Izuku had indicated. The Nomu's shock absorption failed, and the creature was launched through the USJ's dome, disappearing into the distant sky. With their trump card defeated, Shigaraki and Kurogiri retreated, but not before the hand-covered villain fixed Izuku with a hate-filled glare. You weren't supposed to be here. This wasn't in the plan." As the police arrived and the situation was brought under control, All Might, now dangerously close to reverting to his true form, pulled Izuku aside. "Young Midoriya," he began, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Your abilities, they're not a quirk, are they?" Izuku hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir, they're something else. Something you can't explain. Something I don't fully understand myself," Izuku admitted. "But I promise I'm using this power for good, to become a hero, just like you." All Might studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you, but be careful. Power like yours will attract attention, not all of it welcome." The UA Sports Festival arrived just 2 weeks after the USJ incident. Despite the villain attack, the school administration decided to proceed with the event, increasing security measures to ensure student safety. For Izuku, it represented an opportunity to showcase his abilities to the world and perhaps attract the attention of pro-heroes who might help him understand his mysterious power. The first event was an obstacle race, a test of speed, agility, and creative quirk usage. As the signal to start was given, Izuku held back slightly, allowing his classmates to surge ahead. He wanted to observe them, to see how they approached the challenge. Todoroki took an early lead, creating an ice path that simultaneously propelled him forward while freezing others in place. Bakugo blasted over the ice with his explosions, refusing to be left behind. Others used their quirks in equally creative ways, Yaoyorozu creating a motorized scooter, Ida engaging his engine quirk for bursts of speed. When they reached the first major obstacle, a field of giant robots like those from the entrance exam, Izuku decided it was time to stop holding back. Using Soru, he accelerated to speeds that left after images in his wake, weaving between the mechanical giants with ease. When one attempted to block his path, he didn't bother destroying it. Instead, he used Geppo to kick off the air, soaring over the robot in a display of aerial agility that left commentators Present Mick and Aizawa momentarily speechless. "What's this?" Present Mike's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "Midoriya of Class 1A is literally running on air! A racerhead! Is that even legal?" "It's not against the rules," came Aizawa's dry response. Midoriya's abilities continue to defy conventional quirk classification. The second obstacle, a canyon crossed by tight ropes, posed no challenge at all. Izuku simply leapt across the entire chasm, covering the distance in a single bound. By the time he reached the final obstacle, a minefield, he had nearly caught up to Todoroki and Bakugo, who were battling for first place. Rather than carefully navigate the mines, Izuku used Rank Yaku to create a pressure wave that detonated a line of mines ahead of him, then used Geppo to ride the shockwave, propelling himself forward at incredible speed. He shot past his stunned classmates, crossing the finish line with a comfortable lead. "And Midoriya takes first place!" Present Mike announced to thunderous applause. What an incredible display of speed and strategy! As Izuku caught his breath, he felt Todoroki's heterochromatic gaze upon him. The dual quirk user approached with a look of intense concentration. "Midoriya," he said quietly. "You were holding back, weren't you?" Izuku met his gaze evenly. "So were you, Todoroki. I haven't seen you use your left side once." A flicker of surprise crossed Todoroki's normally impassive face. "That's perceptive of you, but irrelevant. I'm going to defeat you using only my right side." "Why limit yourself?" Izuku asked genuinely. "In a real battle against villains, wouldn't you use every tool at your disposal?" Todoroki's expression hardened. "You don't understand? This is personal." Before Izuku could respond, Bakugo arrived at the finish line, his face contorted with frustrated rage. "Deku, that was just luck. Next round, I'll crush you." Izuku simply smiled. "Looking forward to it, Kachan." The second event was the cavalry battle, where students formed teams to capture headbands worth points based on their ranking in the previous event. As the first place finisher, Izuku's headband was worth 10 million points, making him the primary target for every other team. "Midoriya!" Uraraka approached him enthusiastically. "Let's team up." "I'd be happy to," Izuku replied with a smile. "But are you sure? Everyone will be targeting us." "That's exactly why. With your strength and my zero gravity, we'll be unstoppable." They were soon joined by Tokoyami, whose Dark Shadow offered excellent defense, and Hatsume Mei from the support course, who brought an arsenal of babies, support items she had invented. As the event began, Izuku's team immediately found themselves surrounded by competitors, all hungering for the 10 million point headband. Using Geppo, Izuku carried his entire team into the air, evading the initial rush of attacks. "Whoa!" Uraraka exclaimed as they seemingly defied gravity. "How are you doing this?" "Just a technique I learned," Izuku replied, focusing on maintaining their altitude while scanning for threats. From above, they could see Todoroki's team advancing methodically, freezing opponents in place. Bakugo had abandoned his mount to pursue aerial targets, using his explosions for mobility. The team led by Shinso from General Studies was using some kind of mind control quirk to confuse opponents. "We can't stay up here forever," Tokoyami observed as Dark Shadow deflected a projectile from below. "We should have a strategy for when we descend." Izuku nodded. "I have an idea. Uraraka, can you make all of us weightless?" With her quirk activated, the team became virtually weightless, allowing Izuku to maneuver them with incredible speed and precision. They touched down briefly, then immediately launched back into the air whenever threatened, using Hatsume's support items for additional mobility and Tokoyami's Dark Shadow for defense. As the clock wound down, Todoroki's team made their move, a coordinated assault combining ice, engines, and creation quirks. Izuku recognized the threat and responded with a precisely controlled Rankyaku, creating a pressure wave that disrupted their formation without causing injury. Was that win from a kick? Ida gasped, his engines temporarily stalled. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. Midoriya's techniques, they're not like any quirk I've seen. In the final seconds, Bakugo launched a desperate aerial attack, hands crackling with nitroglycerin sweat. Izuku met him in midair, using Geppo to maintain position, while Tokoyami's Dark Shadow intercepted the explosive boy. "Damn it, Deku!" Bakugo roared as the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the event. Izuku's team had successfully defended their 10 million points, securing first place and advancement to the final event, the one-on-one tournament. As they prepared for the tournament, Izuku was approached by Todoroki, who asked to speak with him privately. In a quiet hallway, the dual quirk user revealed the tragic story of his upbringing, how he was essentially bred by his father, the flame hero Endeavor, to surpass all might, and how his mother had scarred his face after his left side reminded her too much of his abusive father. "That's why I won't use his fire," Todoroki concluded, his voice cold with resolve. "I'll reject him completely by winning with only my mother's ice." Izuku listened silently, his heart heavy with sympathy. When Todoroki finished, he met the other boy's mismatched gaze directly. "I understand your feelings toward your father," Izuku said carefully. "What he did was unforgivable. But your fire isn't his, it's yours. By refusing to use it, you're not just rejecting him, you're limiting yourself." "You don't understand." "I do understand what it means to feel powerless," Izuku interrupted gently. "I was born quirkless in a world where that made me nothing. But I refused to accept that limitation. I fought against it with everything I had." Todoroki's expression flickered with surprise. "You were quirkless? But your abilities?" "Aren't a quirk," Izuku confirmed. "They're something I gained through determination, and frankly, a miracle I still don't fully understand. But what I do understand is this. Your power is yours, Todoroki, not your father's. Using it doesn't mean he wins, it means you're free." The tournament began with Izuku facing Shinso, the general studies student with a brainwashing quirk. Warned by Ojiro about Shinso's ability to control anyone who responded to him verbally, Izuku entered the ring with caution. "So you're the famous Midoriya," Shinso called out as the match began. "The so-called quirkless wonder. Do you look down on those of us without flashy combat quirks?" Izuku remained silent, advancing steadily. "Nothing to say?" Shinso taunted. "Is it because you think you're better than me, or because you're scared?" When Izuku continued to ignore him, Shinso's expression turned ugly. "I bet you think you deserve to be in the hero course. What about those of us who have quirks suited for rescue or support? Do we not deserve a chance because we can't smash robots?" It was a clever tactic, attempting to provoke Izuku with legitimate grievances about the entrance exam's bias toward combat quirks. For a moment, Izuku almost responded, almost fell into Shinso's trap, but instead, he closed the distance between them with a subtle application of Soru, appearing directly in front of the surprised general studies student. With a gentle finger tap to Shinso's forehead, a fraction of the power of a real Shigan, Izuku pushed the other boy out of bounds, ending the match without a word. "Midoriya advances to the next round," Present Mike announced to mixed reactions from the crowd. Some appreciated the clinical efficiency, others felt cheated out of a more dramatic contest. As they left the ring, Izuku finally spoke. "Your quirk is amazing, Shinso. It would be incredibly effective against villains. I hope you make it into the hero course. We need diverse abilities like yours." Shinso stared at him in surprise, then offered a grudging nod of acknowledgement. The tournament continued with Izuku watching his classmates' matches with keen interest. Todoroki defeated Sero with overwhelming ice power but seemed troubled afterward. Bakugo fought with his usual ferocity, advancing through his brackets with explosive dominance. Uraraka showed unexpected tactical brilliance against Bakugo, nearly defeating him despite their quirk mismatch. When Izuku faced Tokoyami in the quarterfinals, he demonstrated yet another aspect of his abilities. Dark Shadow was powerful, but Izuku's observation haki allowed him to sense the connection between Tokoyami and his sentient quirk. With precise movements, he was able to disrupt that connection temporarily, creating openings for swift, controlled strikes that eventually forced Tokoyami to concede. "Your control is remarkable," Tokoyami acknowledged after the match. "You found Dark Shadow's weakness without relying on light." In the semifinals, Izuku faced Ida, whose Recipro Burst technique granted him momentary speed that rivaled Izuku's own. For a brief, exhilarating exchange, the two speedsters moved faster than most spectators could follow, their movements visible only as blurs and after images. "What an incredible display of speed," Present Mike screamed into his microphone. "Are we even watching the same match, folks? I can barely see them." Ultimately, Izuku's stamina proved superior. When Ida's engine stalled after overuse, Izuku was able to calmly walk up to his immobilized opponent and offer a handshake before gently guiding him out of bounds. "Your speed is incredible, Ida," Izuku said sincerely. "With more endurance training, you'll be unstoppable." The other semifinal saw Todoroki defeat Bakugo in a clash of ice and explosions. Though Bakugo fought with typical ferocity, Todoroki's ice proved too overwhelming, encasing the explosive boy in a massive glacier before he could build up enough firepower to counter. This set up the final match, Izuku versus Todoroki. As they faced each other in the ring, the stadium fell hushed with anticipation. From the VIP seats, Endeavor's voice boomed out, "Shadow, show him the power of your fire. Prove you're my greatest creation." Todoroki's expression darkened at his father's words. He launched the match with his most powerful ice attack yet, a massive wave of freezing crystals that threatened to encase the entire arena. Izuku didn't dodge. Instead, he drew back his fist, infusing it with armament haki, and punched. The resulting shockwave shattered Todoroki's ice completely, sending crystalline fragments raining down across the stadium. "You'll need to use your full power against me, Todoroki," Izuku called out. "I respect you too much to accept anything less." "Don't tell me what to do," Todoroki growled, sending another wave of ice, larger than the first. Again, Izuku destroyed it with a single punch. Again and again, the pattern repeated. Todoroki attacking with increasingly desperate ice formations, Izuku countering with controlled, devastating force. "Why won't you stay down?" Todoroki panted, his right side beginning to frost over from overuse. "Because a real hero never gives up," Izuku replied, advancing steadily. "And neither should you give up on half of yourself." In the stands, Endeavor leaned forward eagerly. In the announcer's booth, Present Mike and Aizawa watched with professional interest. And in a private box, All Might observed with growing appreciation for the young man who, in another timeline, might have been his successor. Todoroki launched one final massive ice attack, drawing on reserves he didn't know he had. The temperature in the stadium plummeted as a veritable glacier erupted from the ground, threatening to encase not just Izuku, but the entire fighting platform. Izuku closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Then, drawing on the deepest wellspring of the old man's power he had yet accessed, he unleashed a punch that contained not just physical force, but something more, a manifestation of pure willpower that the fragments in his mind identified as Conqueror's Haki. The impact didn't just shatter Todoroki's ice, it created a visible shockwave that rippled through the air, causing weaker spectators in the front rows to momentarily lose consciousness. The ice disintegrated into fine particles that caught the sunlight, creating a momentary rainbow effect across the arena. Todoroki himself was blown backward, landing hard at the edge of the ring. As he struggled to rise, frost covering half his body, he looked up to see Izuku standing over him, hand extended. "Your ice is powerful, Todoroki," Izuku said quietly, "but you're killing yourself using only half your power. Is that what a hero would do? Let innocent people die because you're too proud to use every tool at your disposal?" Something broke in Todoroki then, a mental barrier he had maintained since childhood. With a cry that was part pain, part liberation, flames erupted from his left side, melting the frost and filling the stadium with sudden warmth. That's it, Izuku encouraged. That's your power, not his. For a brief, glorious moment, Todoroki stood wreathed in perfect balance, ice and fire in harmony for the first time. Then, with newfound determination, he attacked with both elements simultaneously, creating a spectacle of opposing forces that drew gasps from the crowd. Izuku met the combined assault head-on, using Geppo to launch himself above the worst of it, then descending with a hockey-infused kick that sent Todoroki skidding to the very edge of the ring. Before the dual quirk user could recover, Izuku was there, using a gentle Shigan to push him out of bounds. "Midoriya wins," Midnight announced, raising her whip. "The champion of the first-year sports festival is Izuku Midoriya." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Izuku paid them no mind. He was focused entirely on Todoroki, who was staring at his left hand as small flames danced across his palm. "Thank you," Todoroki said quietly. "I've been so consumed by hatred that I forgot what it means to be a hero." Izuku smiled. "Your fire is beautiful, Todoroki. It's a part of you, just like your ice. Together, they make you who you are." In the aftermath of the sports festival, Izuku found himself in an unexpected position: celebrity. His dominant performance had captured the attention of the media, pro-heroes, and the public. Magazines wanted interviews, agencies sent internship offers by the dozen, social media buzzed with speculation about the nature of his quirk. Among his classmates, his status shifted subtly. There had always been respect for his abilities, but now there was something more: a recognition that Izuku Midoriya was operating on a level few could comprehend, let alone match. When it came time to choose internships, Izuku received offers from top heroes across Japan, including Endeavor himself, likely hoping to study the power that had pushed his son to finally use his fire. But Izuku chose differently, selecting the Gran Torino agency, run by a semi-retired hero who had once taught All Might. Gran Torino? Uraraka questioned when he shared his decision. "I've never heard of him." "He's not well known anymore," Izuku acknowledged, "but something tells me he might understand my abilities better than most." Gran Torino proved to be a diminutive, seemingly senile old man who initially pretended not to remember requesting Izuku as an intern. But this facade quickly dropped to reveal a sharp-minded, extraordinarily agile hero whose jet quirk allowed movements similar to Izuku's own Geppo technique. "So you're the kid who's got everyone talking," Gran Torino said, studying Izuku with keen eyes. "The one with the unclassifiable quirk." "It's not a quirk, sir," Izuku corrected politely. "It's something else." Gran Torino's eyebrows rose. "Something else, eh? Show me." What followed was less an internship than an intensive investigation. Gran Torino pushed Izuku to demonstrate every technique in his arsenal: Geppo, Soru, Tekkai, Shigan, Rankyaku, Kami, observing each with critical attention. When Izuku demonstrated his developing hockey abilities, the old hero became particularly interested. "This energy," Gran Torino murmured, running a hand through the air where Izuku had manifested his armament hockey. "It's not like any quirk I've encountered. It's more like a force of will made tangible." "That's actually a good description," Izuku admitted. "I call it hockey, though I'm not entirely sure why. The knowledge came with the power." "And you say you received these abilities after collapsing from exhaustion, in some kind of vision?" Izuku nodded. "A white void, an old man with white hair and incredible power. He said I had earned it, that I had no power but a warrior's soul." Gran Torino's expression turned thoughtful. "There are legends, you know, like old stories about powers that existed before quirks. Most dismiss them as myths, but..." Their training was interrupted by breaking news. The hero killer stain had struck again, this time in Hosu City. The notorious villain had been targeting pro-heroes he deemed false, leaving them critically injured or dead. "Hosu," Izuku murmured. "That's where Ida is interning, with the hero manual." A sense of unease filled him. During the sports festival, he had noticed something troubling in Ida's demeanor, a coldness that hadn't been there before. Later, he had learned that Ida's brother, the hero Ingenium, had been among Stain's victims, left paralyzed from the waist down. "Gran Torino," Izuku said suddenly. "I need to go to Hosu." The old hero studied him for a moment and nodded. "I've got patrol duties there anyway, but stick close, understand? The hero killer isn't someone a student should face, no matter how powerful you are." They arrived in Hosu just as chaos erupted. Nomus, similar to the creature from the USJ but smaller and less powerful, were attacking different parts of the city. As heroes scrambled to respond to the multiple threats, Izuku's observation haki picked up a familiar presence. "Ida," he murmured. "He's in trouble. I can feel his anger and fear." Using Geppo and Soru in combination, Izuku moved across the city faster than even Gran Torino could follow, homing in on his classmate's emotional signature. He found Ida in a narrow alleyway, pinned to the ground by Stain's sword through his shoulder. The hero killer stood over him, blade raised for a killing stroke. "Ida!" Izuku shouted, closing the distance with Soru. Stain turned, his long tongue flicking out as he assessed the new arrival. "Another child playing at being a hero? Stay out of this. My business is with the false hero who seeks vengeance rather than justice." "Midoriya," Ida gasped, blood pooling beneath him. "Leave. This is my fight." "No fights are yours alone," Izuku replied, settling into a combat stance. "That's not how heroes work." Stain's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Interesting. You move like a real hero. Let's see if you fight like one." What followed was the most challenging battle of Izuku's young life. Stain was no Nomu. He wasn't a mindless weapon of mass destruction. He was a skilled, experienced killer with a quirk that could paralyze opponents with a single taste of their blood. More than that, his conviction made him dangerous in ways raw power couldn't match. Using his superior speed, Stain darted around Izuku, looking for an opening to draw blood. Izuku countered with Kamiye, making his body flow like paper to avoid the hero killer's blades. When Stain launched a knife at his face, Izuku deflected it with a precisely timed Rankyaku airblade. "Impressive," Stain acknowledged. "You're not an amateur, but you're still inexperienced." With unexpected agility, the villain leapt off a wall and descended on Izuku from above, multiple blades aimed at vital points. Izuku responded with Tekai, hardening his body to withstand the assault, then countered with a Shigan that pierced Stain's shoulder. The hero killer grunted in pain, but didn't slow down. If anything, the injury seemed to invigorate him. "Yes, this is a real fight. Show me the conviction of a true hero." From his position on the ground, Ida watched in awe as his classmate, someone he had respected but never truly understood, battled one of Japan's most feared villains to a standstill. The speed, the precision, the raw power Midoriya displayed weren't just those of a talented student. They were the hallmarks of a professional hero at the peak of their abilities. "Why?" Ida called out, his voice strained with pain and emotion. "Why did you come?" "This is my battle, my brother. Would be ashamed to see you throwing your life away for revenge," Izuku interrupted, parrying another of Stain's attacks. "Heroes save people, Ida. They don't seek vengeance." Those words struck Ida like a physical blow. Tears welled in his eyes as the truth of them penetrated the haze of hatred that had consumed him since his brother's injury. Meanwhile, the battle intensified. Stain, recognizing Izuku as a genuine threat, abandoned his usual methodical approach in favor of all-out assault. Blades flashed from every angle, forcing Izuku to combine defensive techniques with split-second counterattacks. When Stain's blade finally nicked Izuku's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood, the hero killer's tongue lashed out with lightning speed to taste it. Izuku felt his body begin to stiffen as Stain's blood-curdle quirk took effect, but only for a moment. Something in his enhanced physiology, perhaps the old man's incredible constitution, allowed him to shake off the paralysis far faster than should have been possible. Stain's eyes widened in shock as Izuku, who should have been immobilized, launched a counterattack. "Impossible! My quirk!" "Isn't enough," Izuku finished for him, his movements temporarily slowed but not stopped, "because I made a promise to become stronger than anyone, to overcome any limitation." Drawing on his deepening connection to the old man's power, Izuku coated his fist with armament haki, visible now as a glossy black sheen, and delivered a punch that connected squarely with Stain's sternum. The impact sent the hero killer flying backward into a wall, which cracked under the force. To Izuku's surprise, Stain struggled back to his feet, blood dripping from his mouth. "That power, it's like All Might's, but different," he coughed, wiping blood from his lips. "You're interesting, kid. A true hero in the making, unlike these fakes who call themselves professionals." Before the battle could continue, They were interrupted by the arrival of Todoroki, who had tracked Izuku's location using the emergency message he had sent to their class group chat. With a blast of ice, the dual quirk user temporarily immobilized Stain, giving Izuku a moment to check on Ida. "I'm sorry." Ida sobbed as Izuku carefully removed the sword from his shoulder and applied pressure to the wound. "I was so consumed by hatred that I forgot what it means to be a hero." "It's not too late," Izuku assured him. "You can still honor your brother by becoming the hero he knows you can be." Their momentary respite was short-lived. Stain broke free of Todoroki's ice with surprising strength, his killing intent focused now on all three students. Society is diseased, corrupted by false heroes who care only for fame and money. It needs to be purged. What happened next would later be described by Todoroki as the most frightening and inspiring thing he had ever witnessed. As Stain charged, blades drawn and eyes wild with fanatical purpose, Izuku stepped forward to meet him. But instead of attacking, he simply stood his ground and focused. A wave of invisible pressure emanated from Izuku's body. Conqueror's Haki, the rarest and most powerful form of the spiritual energy he had inherited. It manifested as a momentary distortion in the air, accompanied by a sensation of overwhelming presence that made even Todoroki's knees buckle. Stain stopped mid-charge, his body trembling not with fear, but with the effort of remaining conscious under the onslaught of pure willpower. What is this?" "The difference between us," Izuku replied calmly. "You fight for destruction. I fight for protection. That's what makes a true hero." The hero killer staggered, then fell to one knee, his blades clattering to the ground. For the first time, his expression showed something beyond fanatical conviction: respect. "Your spirit," he rasped, "is worthy." Before any of them could react further, pro-heroes arrived on the scene, including Gran Torino, Endeavor, and Manuel. They secured Stain, who had finally lost consciousness from the combination of injuries and Izuku's Conqueror's Haki, and attended to the wounded students. In the aftermath, the three students faced reprimands for engaging a villain without authorization, though these were largely symbolic given the circumstances. More significantly, they received unexpected recognition when footage of the encounter, captured by a nearby security camera, leaked online, showing Izuku standing fearlessly against the hero killer. The incident, while technically a violation of hero regulations, elevated Izuku's public profile even further. Here was a first-year student who had not only dominated the sports festival, but had also faced down one of Japan's most feared villains. Speculation about his abilities reached new heights, with online forums dedicating entire threads to analyzing his techniques. Back at UA, preparations were underway for the end-of-term exams. For the written portion, Izuku performed admirably, his analytical mind serving him well. But it was the practical exam that everyone anticipated, a series of battles pitting student pairs against UA teachers. When the matchups were announced, a collective murmur ran through Class 1A. Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo would be facing All Might himself. "They're pairing the two strongest students against the #1 hero?" Kaminari exclaimed. "That's not a test, that's a death match." Bakugo scoffed. "Doesn't matter who they put us against. I'll pass on my own." "Actually," Aizawa interjected dryly, "the point of these pairings is to highlight your weaknesses. Bakugo, your weakness is teamwork. Midoriya." He paused, studying Izuku thoughtfully. "Let's see if there are any limits to that power of yours." The day of the practical exam arrived with a tense atmosphere. Each student pair faced a different teacher, each matchup designed to challenge specific weaknesses. For Izuku and Bakugo, the challenge wasn't just defeating All Might, an almost impossible task, but working together to either capture him or escape through the exit gate while wearing weighted bracelets that limited their movements. "Listen, Deku," Bakugo growled as they waited for the exam to begin. "I don't need your help. Stay out of my way." Izuku sighed. "Kachan, that's exactly the attitude Aizawa-sensei was talking about. All Might is stronger than both of us combined. We need to work together." "Like hell, I'll show him and you that I don't need anyone." Before Izuku could respond, the ground shook as All Might landed before them, his iconic smile somehow more intimidating than reassuring. "I am here to test you." The symbol of peace was holding back, of course. He had to be, or he would have seriously injured his students. But even at a fraction of his full power, All Might was a force of nature. The air pressure from his punches alone was enough to shatter concrete. Bakugo, true to form, immediately launched himself at the hero, hands crackling with explosions. Die! All Might caught him effortlessly, spinning the explosive boy around and tossing him through a nearby building. You'll need to do better than that, young Bakugo! Izuku used the distraction to analyze the situation. All Might was fast, faster than anyone Izuku had faced before. But thanks to his observation haki, Izuku could track his movements. More concerning was the raw power behind each of the hero's strikes. Even glancing blows felt like being hit by a truck. Using Geppo, Izuku took to the air, circling around to approach All Might from behind. The hero sensed his presence, no surprise there, and turned to meet him with a wide smile. Clever, young Midoriya, but predictable. All Might's punch cut through the air with devastating force, but Izuku had anticipated it. Using Kamiye, he let his body flow around the blow, then countered with a haki-infused strike to All Might's solar plexus. The hero grunted in surprise, clearly not expecting a student to land a solid hit, but recovered instantly, grabbing Izuku's arm and hurling him toward the same building where Bakugo had crashed. Izuku used Geppo to control his trajectory, landing lightly beside his fuming partner. Kachan, listen, we can't beat him head-on. We need a plan. I have a plan, Bakugo snarled, rising to his feet. Hit him until he stays down. That won't work and you know it, but we might be able to escape if we work together. Before Bakugo could object further, All Might's voice boomed through the shattered wall. Hiding won't save you, young heroes. In a real battle, hesitation means death. With a massive punch, the hero demolished the remaining structure, forcing the students into the open. What followed was a high-speed game of cat and mouse, with All Might relentlessly pursuing while Izuku tried to coordinate with an increasingly frustrated Bakugo. It was during one particularly intense exchange that Izuku noticed something. All Might was breathing heavily, his movements slightly slower than at the start. The hero was on a time limit, his true form threatening to emerge. Kachan, Izuku called out, deflecting another of All Might's punches with Tekai-hardened arms. He's getting slower. If we can hold out a little longer... I don't need to hold out, Bakugo roared, unleashing his AP shot, a concentrated explosion designed for piercing power. The blast struck All Might directly, momentarily staggering the hero. Seeing an opening, Izuku moved in, using Soru to appear directly before All Might. With precise timing, he executed a series of Shigan strikes targeted at pressure points, not to injure, but to momentarily disrupt the hero's muscle control. All Might grunted in surprise as his left arm briefly went numb. Impressive, young Midoriya! You've been holding back in class, haven't you? Taking advantage of the moment, Izuku grabbed Bakugo, ignoring his protests, and used Geppo to launch them both toward the exit gate. All Might recovered quickly, leaping to intercept them with speed that belied his massive frame. We're not finished yet, young heroes. What happened next surprised everyone, including Izuku himself. As All Might descended upon them, Izuku instinctively reached for a deeper level of the old man's power. His armament haki expanded, coating not just his fists but his entire body in a glossy black sheen. When All Might's fist connected, instead of sending Izuku flying, it resulted in a shockwave that blew out windows for blocks around. Izuku stood firm, his haki-coated arms crossed in a defensive position, having successfully blocked a direct punch from the symbol of peace. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across All Might's perpetually smiling face. Young Midoriya, what are you? That moment of hesitation was all they needed. Bakugo, momentarily stunned by Izuku's display, recovered his senses in the most powerful explosion yet, creating a smokescreen that obscured All Might's vision. Through the chaos, the two students made a final dash for the exit gate, crossing the threshold just as All Might's massive hand closed on empty air behind them. Team Midoriya and Bakugo pass, announced Present Mike's voice over the loudspeaker. As they caught their breath, Bakugo fixed Izuku with an intense stare. That black armor thing, you've never used that in our fights. Izuku shook his head. I'm still learning to control it. It takes a lot of concentration and energy. Shh. Don't think this makes us friends, Deku. Next time, I won't need your help. But there was something different in Bakugo's tone, a grudging respect that hadn't been there before. He had witnessed firsthand Izuku blocking a punch from All Might, something that should have been impossible for any first-year student. After the exams came summer vacation, and with it, the UA Forest training camp, an intensive session designed to help the students improve their quirks through constant use and pushed limits. Class 1A, along with Class 1B, traveled to a remote mountain facility run by the Wild Pussycats hero team. For Izuku, the camp represented an opportunity to deepen his understanding of the abilities he had inherited. While his classmates focused on quirk endurance and new applications, Izuku worked on refining his control over Haki, particularly the advanced forms that had begun manifesting during his fight with All Might. Under Pixie Bob's guidance, he practiced projecting his armament Haki beyond his body, creating barriers of invisible force that could block incoming attacks. With Tiger, he honed his hand-to-hand combat techniques, incorporating Rokushiki and Haki into fluid combinations. During one evening session, as Izuku meditated at the edge of the forest, focusing on extending his observation Haki to its limits, he sensed a familiar presence approaching. "Todoroki," he acknowledged without opening his eyes. "Something on your mind?" The dual quirk user sat beside him, flames dancing subtly around his left hand, a habit he had developed since embracing his fireside. "Your abilities," Todoroki began directly. "They're not a quirk, are they?" Izuku opened his eyes. "No. I told you before. I was born quirkless." "Then what changed? People don't just develop powers like yours through training alone." For a moment, Izuku considered deflecting the question as he had with others. But something about Todoroki's straightforward manner and the trust they had built since the sports festival made him reconsider. "It was a gift," he said finally, "from someone I met when I was at my lowest point. I don't know who he was, just an old man with white hair and incredible strength. He said I had earned it through determination." Todoroki was quiet for a long moment. "Do you ever wonder who he was?" "This old man?" "All the time," Izuku admitted. "Sometimes I get flashes, memories that aren't mine, battles against enemies I've never met, in places I've never been. It's like I inherited not just his power, but fragments of his life." Before Todoroki could respond, Izuku stiffened, his observation Haki suddenly alerting him to multiple unfamiliar presences approaching the camp, presences radiating hostility and killing intent. "We're under attack," he said, rising swiftly to his feet. "The League of Villains. They've found us." Even as he spoke, the forest erupted in unnatural blue flames, spreading rapidly through the underbrush. Through the chaos, Izuku could sense his classmates scattered throughout the training grounds, many already engaged with villains who had somehow bypassed the facility's security measures. "We need to warn the others," Todoroki said, immediately creating an ice path toward the main building. Izuku nodded. "I'll check on those in the forest. My observation Haki can track them even through the smoke." Using Geppo and Soru in combination, Izuku moved through the burning forest at incredible speed, locating and assisting his classmates as they encountered various members of the League of Villains. He found Uraraka and Tsuyu trapped by a villain with a magnetism quirk, freeing them with a precisely aimed Rankyaku that sliced through the metal binding them. He rescued Kaminari from a villain who was draining his electricity, using Shigen to disable the enemy without causing permanent injury. As he helped Kirishima fend off a muscle-bound villain with multiple arms, Izuku's observation Haki alerted him to a far more dangerous presence deep in the forest, a palpable bloodlust unlike anything he had felt since the Nomu at USJ. "Kirishima," he said urgently, "get everyone back to the main building. There's something dangerous out there." The redhead nodded. "What about you?" "I'm going to find it before it finds us." Using his heightened senses, Izuku tracked the malevolent presence to a clearing where a masked figure stood waiting. The newcomer was tall and muscular, with a patchwork appearance and an unsettling aura of casual violence. Well, the masked villain said, his voice distorted. "You must be Midoriya, the one Shigaraki is so fixated on." He tilted his head curiously. "You're smaller than I expected." Izuku settled into a fighting stance. "Who are you?" "Names aren't important, but if you insist, you can call me Muscular." The villain flexed, muscle fibers visibly writhing beneath his skin. "I was told to leave you alive if possible, but accidents happen." With frightening speed, Muscular lunged forward, his arms swelling grotesquely as muscle fibers multiplied and enhanced his striking power. Izuku barely had time to coat his forearms with armament haki before the blow connected, sending him skidding backward through the dirt. "Oh?" Muscular sounded pleased. "You're still standing. Most people are paced after that." Izuku adjusted his stance, assessing his opponent. Muscular's quirk clearly enhanced his physical abilities to an extreme degree, perhaps beyond even what Izuku's inherited strength could match directly. But raw power wasn't everything. Using Soru, Izuku circled the villain at high speed, creating afterimages to confuse him. When Muscular lashed out at one such afterimage, Izuku struck from behind, delivering a haki-infused punch to the villain's kidney. Muscular grunted in pain but recovered quickly, muscle fibers shifting to protect the injured area. Fast and strong. No wonder Shigaraki's worried about you. The battle intensified, with Muscular unleashing increasingly powerful attacks as more and more muscle fibers erupted from his body. Trees shattered under the force of missed blows. The ground cratered where they clashed. It was becoming clear that this villain wasn't just another League member. He was a genuine threat on par with the Nomu. Drawing on his deepening connection to the old man's power, Izuku began to integrate his techniques more fluidly. When Muscular launched a devastating right hook, Izuku used Kami-A to flow around it, then countered with a Geppo-assisted aerial Rankyaku that sliced through some of the villain's exposed muscle fibers. Muscular howled in pain but seemed more excited than deterred. "Yes! This is what I've been looking for. A real fight!" As the villain's attacks grew more frenzied, Izuku found himself pushed to new limits. Muscular's raw power was beginning to overwhelm even his Tekkai defense, forcing him to rely more on evasion than direct blocking. But with each exchange, something was building within Izuku, a deeper connection to the old man's power, triggered by the life-or-death nature of the battle. In a moment of clarity between clashes, Izuku experienced another flash of foreign memory, the old man facing down a similar brute force opponent, countering overwhelming physical power not with matching strength, but with precisely targeted internal destruction. "Advanced armament," Izuku murmured, understanding flowing into him. When Muscular charged again, Izuku stood his ground. Rather than coating his fist with the usual glossy black armament haki, he focused the energy inward, creating an invisible field that extended just beyond his skin. As Muscular's fist connected with his palm, Izuku allowed the energy to flow outward, not to block, but to penetrate. The effect was immediate and devastating. Muscular's muscle fibers began to rupture from within, the internal damage spreading up his arm like cracks in glass. The villain stumbled backward, staring at his twitching arm in shock. What did you do to me?" "Internal destruction?" Izuku explained calmly. "Your muscles are strong on the outside, but they're vulnerable from within." Muscular's shock quickly turned to rage. With a roar of anger, he charged again, his remaining functional muscles swelling to compensate for the damaged arm. Izuku met the charge head-on, this time fully embracing the advanced armament technique. When their fists collided, the resulting shockwave flattened trees for yards around, but it was Muscular who went flying backward, his muscle fibers shredding from the inside out. The villain crashed through several trees before coming to rest, unconscious and mostly defanged, his quirk temporarily disabled by the internal damage to his muscle control. Izuku stood panting, the exertion of using the advanced technique taking its toll. But there was no time to rest. His observation haki was alerting him to more danger, specifically a concentrated attack on Bakugo, who was fighting alongside Todoroki against multiple villains. Using Geppo to navigate through the burning forest, Izuku arrived just in time to see a figure in a black costume with a beaked mask approaching his classmates. Something about this newcomer sent chills down Izuku's spine, not raw power like Muscular, but a calculating malevolence that felt somehow familiar. "Midoriya!" Todoroki called out, maintaining an ice barrier between them and several advancing villains. "They're after Bakugo!" "Like hell, they're taking me!" Bakugo snarled, hands sparking with barely contained explosions. "I'll kill them all!" The figure in the beaked mask tilted his head, studying Izuku with unnerving intensity. "So this is the anomaly," he said, his voice cultured and calm. "Fascinating. Your power signature is unusual." Before Izuku could respond, the masked figure gestured, and a portal opened beside Bakugo, similar to Kurogiri's warp gates, but somehow different. A hand emerged from the darkness, grasping for the explosive boy. "Kachan!" Izuku shouted, using Soru to cross the distance instantly. But he was intercepted by the masked figure, who moved with surprising speed to block his path. "I'm afraid I can't let you interfere. This acquisition is too important." Something in the man's demeanor, the clinical detachment, the casual confidence, triggered another flash of memory from the old man. A battlefield strewn with bodies, a similar masked figure standing amid the carnage, speaking of experiments and subjects with the same detached interest. Rage, not his own, but inherited from the old warrior, surged through Izuku. Without conscious thought, he unleashed a wave of Conqueror's haki more powerful than anything he had managed before. The invisible pressure radiated outward like a shockwave, causing lesser villains to collapse unconscious and even staggering the masked figure. "Impressive," the man murmured, regaining his composure. "Very few possess that particular ability." Using the momentary advantage, Izuku lunged for Bakugo, who was fighting off the hands emerging from the portal with increasingly desperate explosions. But the masked figure recovered too quickly, interposing himself once more. "Your power is remarkable," the man continued conversationally, as if they weren't in the middle of a battle. "But unrefined, unscientific. It lacks purpose." Izuku's response was a combination of techniques executed with fluid precision: Geppo to launch himself upward, Soru to accelerate his descent, and a haki-infused Rankyaku that sent a blade of compressed air directly at the masked figure. The man dodged with inhuman reflexes, but the attack served its purpose, creating an opening for Izuku to reach Bakugo. Just as Izuku's hand closed around Bakugo's arm, ready to pull him to safety, multiple portals opened around them. The masked figure's voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. A valiant effort, but futile. The acquisition has already been approved at the highest level. Hands emerged from every portal, grasping at both students. Izuku used Tekkai to harden his body, shrugging off the grasping limbs, while Bakugo blasted them away with explosions. Todoroki, seeing their predicament, sent a massive wave of ice toward them, attempting to freeze the portals closed. For a brief moment, it seemed they might succeed in repelling the coordinated attack. Then, a final portal opened directly beneath Bakugo, larger than the others, and he began to sink into it despite his struggles. "Deku!" he shouted, real fear breaking through his usual aggression. Izuku lunged forward, grasping Bakugo's outstretched hand. Their fingers touched, then slipped apart as the portal closed, taking Bakugo with it. "Kachan!" Izuku's cry echoed through the forest, but it was too late. His childhood friend, his rival, was gone, captured by villains for purposes unknown. The masked figure remained, studying Izuku with that same unsettling intensity. "Your reaction is noted. Attachment. Predictable, but useful data nonetheless. Who are you?" Izuku demanded, haki flaring around his clenched fists. "What do you want with Bakugo?" "You may call me Mr. Compress," the figure replied with a theatrical bow. "As for your friend, he's merely a means to an end. A necessary component in a larger experiment, one that I suspect might eventually include you as well." Before Izuku could attack, Mr. Compress vanished into one of his own portals, leaving behind only his parting words. "We'll meet again, Izuku Midoriya. Your power is too intriguing to ignore." In the aftermath of the attack, the forest training camp was abandoned, the injured students and teachers evacuated to hospitals. Bakugo's kidnapping dominated the news, with media outlets questioning UA's security measures and the wisdom of continuing the hero program after two major villain attacks in a single semester. For Izuku, however, the only concern was rescuing Kachan. As he sat in the hospital, his minor injuries already healing thanks to his enhanced constitution, his mind raced with possible plans. His observation haki, while powerful, couldn't track Bakugo over such distances. But perhaps if he could find a way to locate the League's hideout. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Kirishima, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Ida, all looking grave but determined. "Midoriya," Kirishima began without preamble. "We're going to rescue Bakugo." Izuku looked up sharply. "How?" Yaoyorozu held up a small device. "I placed a tracker on one of the Nomus during the attack. If they take it back to their base, we might find where they're keeping Bakugo," Todoroki finished. Ida, ever the class representative, looked conflicted. I want to emphasize that I believe this is a job for the pros, but after what happened with Stain, I understand the impulse to act. Izuku stood, his decision already made. When do we leave? The plan was simple but risky. Use Yaoyorozu's tracker to locate the League's hideout, conduct reconnaissance only, and alert the pros if they found Bakugo. No direct engagement, no heroics, just information gathering. Of course, plans rarely survive contact with reality. Using civilian clothes to avoid attention, the 5 students made their way to Kamino Ward, where the tracker signal was strongest. What they found was a nondescript bar in a rundown area, hardly the villain headquarters they had imagined. "Are you sure this is the place?" Kirishima whispered as they observed from a safe distance. Yaoyorozu checked her device again. The signal is coming from inside that building. Using his observation haki, Izuku extended his senses toward the structure. "I can feel 7 people inside. One of them is Bakugo. His presence is unmistakable. He's angry but unharmed." "You can sense that much detail?" Todoroki asked, impressed. Izuku nodded. "It's getting clearer with practice. I can also sense that they're waiting for something or someone." Before they could decide on their next move, the decision was made for them. The street suddenly filled with pro-heroes, dozens of them led by All Might himself, accompanied by police in tactical gear. It's a raid, Ida realized. The pros found the hideout independently. The students watched from their hiding place as the heroes stormed the building, the operation executed with military precision. Explosions and combat sounds erupted from within, but it was over almost as quickly as it began. When the dust settled, villains were being let out in restraints, but Bakugo wasn't among them, nor was the masked figure who had captured him. "Something's wrong," Izuku murmured, his observation haki stretching to its limits. "I can still sense Bakugo, but he's moving. Underground." A terrible realization struck him. It's a decoy. The real hideout is elsewhere. Even as he spoke, multiple Nomus appeared throughout Kamino Ward, creating chaos that divided the hero's attention. In the confusion, Izuku sensed Bakugo's presence surfacing several blocks away, along with multiple powerful villains, including one whose malevolent aura dwarfed all others. "All for one," Izuku whispered, the name coming to him from another fragment of the old man's memories, a glimpse of a conversation about legendary villains across dimensions. Without explaining to his confused friends, Izuku activated Geppo and Soru together, launching himself toward the new threat at speeds that made him nearly invisible to the naked eye. Buildings blurred past as he homed in on Bakugo's emotional signature, anger, fear, and stubborn defiance all mixed together. He arrived at a warehouse district in time to see a confrontation that would be seared into his memory forever. All Might, his muscular form straining with effort, facing a man in a black suit and strange breathing apparatus. Between them stood Shigaraki, flanked by Kurogiri and other League members, with Bakugo held captive, but still fighting. "Kachan!" Izuku called out. All heads turned toward him, including that of the suited man, whose featureless mask somehow conveyed amusement despite its lack of expression. "Ah," the man said, his voice unnaturally deep and resonant. "The anomaly arrives. How convenient." All Might's expression shifted to one of alarm. "Young Midoriya, get back!" This isn't a villain you can face. But Izuku was already moving, his focus entirely on reaching Bakugo. Using the techniques that had become second nature to him, he weaved through the assembled villains with fluid grace, evading Kurogiri's warp gates and Shigaraki's decaying touch. "Deku." Bakugo's surprise was evident even through his anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving you." Izuku replied simply, reaching for his friend. Before he could complete the rescue, however, a wave of pure force slammed into him from behind. Not a physical attack, but a manifestation of power so concentrated it felt like being hit by a train. Izuku was sent tumbling across the ground, his Tekai defense barely activated in time to prevent serious injury. "Interesting," came the suited man's voice. "All for one, the master villain. Your power isn't a quirk I can take, it's something else. Something outside my usual domain." Izuku struggled to his feet, facing the villain directly for the first time. Though he couldn't see the man's eyes behind his mask, he could feel them studying him with clinical interest. "You remind me of someone." All for one continued conversationally, as if they weren't in the middle of a life-or-death confrontation. "Not from this world, perhaps, but similar in essence. a power that defies conventional understanding. Before Izuku could respond, All Might intervened, launching himself at All for One with a battle cry that shook the very air. "Stay away from my student!" What followed was a clash of titans that Izuku could barely track, even with his enhanced perception. All Might and All for One exchanged blows that created shockwaves, their battle quickly escalating to a level that threatened to destroy the entire district. In the chaos, Izuku refocused on his original mission, rescuing Bakugo. Using the distraction provided by the main battle, he once again navigated through the League members, this time joined by his classmates who had followed his trail. "Bakugo!" Kirishima called out, extending his hardened arm. "Grab on!" With a defiant grin at his captors, Bakugo blasted himself free, grabbing Kirishima's hand as Izuku and the others provided cover. Their escape was nearly complete when All for One, despite his ongoing battle with All Might, somehow found time to notice their efforts. "I think not," the villain said mildly, raising a hand in their direction. Izuku sensed the attack coming, a concentrated burst of force aimed directly at the escaping students. Without hesitation, he placed himself in its path, arms crossed and body hardened with the most powerful Tekai he could muster, reinforced with armament haki. The impact was like nothing he had ever experienced, pure, concentrated destruction that threatened to overwhelm even his supernatural defenses. But as the force crashed against him, something unexpected happened. Deep within Izuku, triggered by the life-or-death situation, another fragment of the old man's power awakened. His armament haki expanded beyond mere hardening, forming a barrier that extended outward from his body, an advanced application he had only glimpsed in flashes of inherited memory. The barrier absorbed All for One's attack, the energy dissipating harmlessly around Izuku like water breaking against a rock. All for One paused his assault on All Might, his attention fully captured by this unexpected development. Fascinating. That technique, it's not of this world, is it, boy? In that moment of distraction, All Might launched his counterattack, a devastating punch that connected squarely with the villain's mask. "Your fight is with me. All for One." The battle between the two titans resumed with even greater intensity, allowing Izuku and his friends to complete their rescue of Bakugo. As they retreated to a safe distance, Izuku kept his senses focused on the clash of powers behind them, his heart heavy with worry for his mentor. "We need to get further away," Todoroki urged, supporting a weakened Yaoyorozu. "This entire area could collapse." But Izuku hesitated, sensing something troubling in All Might's energy signature, a faltering, a diminishing that spoke of reserves pushed beyond their limits. The symbol of peace was reaching the end of his strength. "Go," he told his classmates firmly. "Get Kachan to safety. I need to go back." "Are you insane?" Bakugo grabbed his arm. "That's All for One. Even All Might is struggling." Izuku met his childhood friend's gaze steadily. "I know. That's why I have to help." Before anyone could stop him, Izuku was moving again, using Geppo and Soru to return to the battlefield at incredible speed. What he found there confirmed his fears. All Might had begun to shrink, his muscular form flickering as he struggled to maintain it against All for One's relentless assault. "Your time is up, symbol of peace," the villain was saying, his mask cracked, but his voice still carrying that unnatural resonance. "The world will see you for what you truly are, a hollow shell, a false icon." All Might, despite his diminishing strength, stood firm. "Even if my body fails, my spirit won't. As long as people need saving, I will be their hero." As All for One prepared another devastating attack, Izuku made his decision. Using every ounce of speed he possessed, he appeared between All Might and the villain, his body already hardened with Tekai and armament haki. "Young Midoriya, no!" All Might cried out. All for One paused, his attack held in check by curiosity. The anomaly returns, brave but foolish. "I won't let you hurt him," Izuku stated simply, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure of the villain's presence. "All Might is the symbol of peace and justice. He's the hero who inspired me when I had nothing." "Noble sentiments," All for One replied, sounding almost regretful, but ultimately meaningless against absolute power. The villain launched his attack, a combination of multiple quirks designed to destroy anything in its path. Izuku stood his ground, drawing on the deepest wellspring of the old man's power he had yet accessed. His body glowed with armament haki, no longer just a black sheen, but an iridescent barrier that seemed to distort the very air around him. When the attack connected, something unexpected happened. Instead of being overwhelmed, Izuku's barrier held more than held. It reflected the force back at its source, sending All For One staggering backward for the first time in the battle. "Impossible," the villain muttered, genuine surprise in his voice. "That power, it's like..." Before he could complete the thought, All Might seized the opportunity, summoning the last vestiges of his strength for one final attack. United States of Smash! The symbol of peace's ultimate technique connected with devastating force, the impact creating a cyclone that tore through the battlefield. All For One was driven into the ground with such power that it created a crater visible from space, the shockwave shattering windows for miles around. When the dust settled, All Might stood victorious, but only barely. His muscular form had completely dissipated, revealing the skeletal truth beneath. The secret was out. The world now saw their greatest hero as he truly was, a thin, wounded man who had given everything for their protection. Yet even in this diminished state, All Might raised his fist in triumph, a final symbol of victory for the cameras that had captured the battle. "You're next," he declared, pointing to the future generation of heroes, to Izuku, who stood nearby, his own power momentarily spent from the effort of deflecting All For One's attack. As medical teams and heroes arrived to secure the scene, All Might approached Izuku, his steps unsteady, but his gaze firm. "Young Midoriya," he said quietly, "what you did was reckless, and exactly what a true hero would do." Izuku, exhausted but relieved, managed to smile. "I couldn't let you face him alone. That barrier you created," All Might continued, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "I've never seen anything like it, not in all my years as a hero." "Neither had I," Izuku admitted. "It just happened when I needed it most." All Might studied him thoughtfully. "Your power continues to evolve in ways no one could predict. It makes me wonder." He trailed off, lost in thought. Before Izuku could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by the arrival of other pro-heroes, including Endeavor, whose expression upon seeing All Might's true form was a complex mixture of shock, disappointment, and something like concern. "Is it over?" the Flame Hero demanded. "All For One is contained?" All Might nodded warily. "For now, but his influence remains. The League is still out there, and Shigaraki escaped in the chaos." As the cleanup began and the injured were tended to, Izuku found himself surrounded by his classmates, who had returned despite his instructions to evacuate. They bombarded him with questions and exclamations, but he barely heard them. His attention was caught by a strange sensation, another memory fragment surfacing, more vivid than any before. In this vision, he saw the old man, the white-haired warrior who had given him his power, standing on a battlefield much like this one, facing a different kind of villain. The old man's fist was raised, coated in the same iridescent haki that Izuku had just manifested. As he declared his title to his opponent, "I am Fist of Justice, hero of the world, and I will not let you threaten the innocent." The name echoed in Izuku's mind as the vision faded, leaving him with a newfound understanding of his power's origin and the responsibility that came with it. He had inherited the strength, techniques, and spirit of a legendary warrior from another world, a protector who had stood against evil with nothing but his fists and unbreakable will. As he looked around at the aftermath of the battle, All Might's secret revealed, All For One captured, but his influence still felt, Bakugo rescued but forever changed by his ordeal, Izuku understood that this was just the beginning. The true test of his inherited power and his worthiness to wield it was yet to come. A new era was dawning in the hero world. All Might's time as the symbol of peace was ending, and Izuku Midoriya, once quirkless but now carrying the legacy of marine hero GARP, would have to decide what kind of symbol he would become. In the weeks following the Kamino Ward incident, Japan struggled to come to terms with a changed world. All Might's true form had been revealed to the public, and while he remained a teacher at UA, his days as the active symbol of peace were over. Crime rates surged as villains, emboldened by All Might's retirement, emerged from the shadows. For Izuku, the aftermath brought unexpected challenges. As news of his role in the battle spread, grainy footage showing him standing between All Might and All For One, somehow deflecting an attack that should have annihilated him, He found himself under intense scrutiny. Pro heroes wanted to understand his abilities. Media outlets speculated wildly about his quirk. Government agencies monitored him with wary interest. But most significant was the change within himself. The battle had awakened something deeper. More memories from the white-haired warrior, more techniques bubbling to the surface of his consciousness. In quiet moments, Izuku found himself remembering battles he had never fought, opponents he had never faced, a lifetime of experience that wasn't his own. "Fist of Justice," he murmured one evening, practicing forms in his bedroom. "Hero of the world, marine hero Garp." The name felt right somehow, a piece of a puzzle finally fitting into place. This was the identity of his benefactor, the source of his power. Not just any warrior, but a legendary one, someone whose very presence had changed the course of history in another world. When UA reopened, security had been significantly enhanced. Students now lived in dormitories on campus, their safety a top priority after 2 major villain attacks. As Class 1A settled into their new living arrangements, Aizawa announced their next major challenge, the Provisional Hero License Exam. After recent events, he explained, his expression even more serious than usual, the Commission has accelerated the licensing process. Those who pass will be authorized to use their quirks in emergency situations, even without pro-supervision. The class erupted in excited chatter, but Izuku remained thoughtful. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a responsibility, a chance to legally use his growing power to protect others. Training for the exam intensified immediately. Under Aizawa's watchful eye, the students developed new techniques, special moves designed to define their hero identities. For most, this meant pushing their quirks in new directions. For Izuku, it meant deeper integration of the abilities he had inherited. During one training session, as he practiced combining Geppo with rapid-fire Shigun strikes, another memory surfaced, Garp demolishing an entire fortress with a single punch, the impact creating a crater visible for miles. The technique had a name, whispered in Izuku's mind with reverent awe, Galaxy Impact. That evening, in a secluded training ground, Izuku attempted to recreate it. Drawing on everything he had learned about hockey, he focused his power into his fist, not just hardening it, but imbuing it with something more fundamental, a concentration of pure will made physical. When his fist connected with a reinforced training dummy, the result exceeded all expectations. The dummy didn't just break, it disintegrated, along with several behind it. The ground cratered beneath the impact, and a visible shockwave rippled through the air, shattering windows in the nearby support building. "Midoriya!" Aizawa appeared instantly, capture weapon at the ready. "What did you just do?" Izuku stared at his smoking fist in shock. I think I unlocked a new technique." The day of the provisional license exam arrived with heavy anticipation. Hundreds of hero students from across Japan gathered at the National Dagoba Arena, each determined to secure one of the limited licenses available. As Mera, the exam administrator, explained the first phase, a battle royale where students would use target markers to eliminate opponents, Izuku extended his observation haki, mapping the emotional signatures of the assembled students. Most radiated determination and nervousness, but he detected something else, focused hostility directed specifically at UAA students. "Everyone's targeting us," he warned his classmates quietly. "The sports festival made us visible, and recent incidents have put UA in the spotlight. They'll come for us first." His prediction proved accurate. When the exam began and students scattered across the massive arena, Izuku sensed coordinated groups converging on UA's location. Using Geppo to gain height, he surveyed the battlefield with enhanced perception. "Kachan, 3 o'clock," he called out, his voice carrying to his explosive classmate. "Ida, support Yaoyorozu. She's creating defenses for our rear." The first wave of attackers found themselves facing a prepared UA defense. Bakugo's explosions, Todoroki's ice and fire, Kirishima's hardening, all worked in concert, guided by Izuku's tactical awareness. But the pressure was relentless, with more students joining the assault by the minute. "We need to break their coordination," Izuku realized. Another memory surfaced, Garp disrupting an enemy formation by creating chaos in their midst, using overwhelming presence rather than direct attack. Drawing on that experience, Izuku launched himself high above the battlefield with Geppo, then descended with precisely calculated force. When he landed at the center of the largest attacking group, he released a controlled pulse of Conqueror's haki, not enough to render anyone unconscious, but sufficient to disrupt concentration and create momentary confusion. In that window of opportunity, he moved with Lightning Soru, a refined version of the speed technique that made him appear to teleport between opponents. With surgical precision, he tapped target markers, eliminating a dozen students before they could recover their composure. The display caused many attackers to reconsider their strategy, creating breathing room for his classmates. As the exam progressed, Izuku shifted from offense to coordination, using his enhanced senses to direct his friends away from danger and toward vulnerable targets. When the first phase ended, all of Class 1A had advanced, a remarkable achievement given the focused opposition they had faced. The second phase, however, presented a different challenge, a simulated disaster zone where they would need to rescue civilians while contending with a professional hero playing the role of villain. As they entered the ruined cityscape, Izuku's future sight, an advanced application of observation haki he had been developing, activated spontaneously. He saw not just the present moment, but potential futures branching out before him. Falling debris that would endanger civilians, rescue attempts that would fail without proper support, the villains planned attacks before they occurred. Everyone, he called out, instinctively falling into a command role that felt both foreign and familiar, another echo of GARP'S experience as a leader. We need to coordinate. Uraraka, Tsuyu, take the east sector. Todoroki, create ice paths for evacuation. Kirishima and Kachan, you're our forward defense. His classmates responded to the authority in his voice, organizing into efficient teams. Izuku himself used Storm Geppo, an enhanced version that created hurricane force winds with each step, to rapidly move throughout the disaster zone, identifying priorities and redirecting resources as needed. When Gang Orca, the pro hero playing the villain role, launched his attack, Izuku was already prepared. His future sight had shown him the hero's approach vector and initial targets. Using Lightning Soru, he intercepted Gang Orca just as the pro was about to overwhelm Kaminari and Mina. I've got this, Izuku assured his classmates. Continue the evacuations. Gang Orca studied him with professional interest. Midoriya, I've heard about you. Show me if the rumors are true. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration. Gang Orca was powerful, one of Japan's top heroes with formidable physical abilities and sonic attacks that could paralyze opponents. But against Izuku's evolved techniques, he found himself overwhelmed. When the pro unleashed his sonic attack, Izuku used Phantom Kamie, a perfected evasion technique that made his body flow like water, impossible to hit. When Gang Orca attempted physical strikes, Izuku countered with Adamantine Tekai, hardening his body beyond what should have been humanly possible. The decisive moment came when Gang Orca, frustrated by his inability to land a meaningful blow, committed to an all-out attack. Izuku saw the move coming through future sight and made a tactical decision. Rather than evade, he met the attack head-on with a technique he had been refining since his training breakthrough, Meteor Fist. Unlike Galaxy Impact, which concentrated force into a single devastating blow, Meteor Fist was a rapid barrage of haki-infused strikes, each powerful enough to shatter concrete. The attacks rained down on Gang Orca like celestial bombardment, too numerous and too fast to dodge or block. The pro hero staggered backward, visibly stunned by the assault. Before he could recover, Izuku followed with a single perfectly placed strike to a pressure point, not to injure, but to temporarily immobilize. I apologize for the force, sir, Izuku said respectfully as Gang Orca found himself unable to continue fighting, but there are civilians who need evacuation. The display left observers speechless. Even the exam administrators, watching via monitors, exchanged concerned glances. What they had just witnessed wasn't the performance of a student, but of someone who could already stand among top professionals. When the results were announced, Izuku had scored among the highest in exam history, receiving his provisional license alongside most of his classmates. Only Bakugo and Todoroki had failed. Bakugo due to his aggressive approach towards civilians, and Todoroki because of a targeted intervention from a student with a grudge against his father. As they departed the arena, Izuku found himself approached by several pro heroes who had been observing the exam. That technique you used, one said, studying him with professional interest. The rapid strikes followed by the immobilization. I've never seen anything like it. Izuku smiled politely. Just something I've been developing through training. The pro looked unconvinced, but didn't press further. As the hero walked away, Izuku heard him mutter to a colleague, "That wasn't just training, that was experience." The statement resonated uncomfortably. More and more, Izuku found himself drawing on GARP'S memories. Not just techniques, but tactical knowledge, battlefield awareness, even mannerisms that weren't his own. Sometimes in the middle of training or combat, he would briefly forget who he was, operating on instincts developed over a lifetime he had never lived. Was he still Izuku Midoriya, or was he becoming something else? A vessel for a warrior from another world? The question lingered as UA resumed regular classes. With his provisional license, Izuku began participating in supervised patrol work, gaining practical experience alongside established pros. During one such patrol with the hero Riku, they encountered a situation that would lead to Izuku's next great challenge: a meeting with Sir Night-Eye, All Might's former sidekick, and an introduction to a criminal organization called the Shi Hasaikai. Sir Night-Eye's agency was investigating the Yakuza group, suspecting them of developing and distributing a drug that could permanently erase quirks. When Izuku, along with Uraraka and Tsuyu, was invited to join the investigation, he found himself under Night-Eye's critical gaze. "You're the one All Might speaks of," the formal hero said, studying Izuku with analytical precision, the boy with the unclassifiable abilities. "Yes, sir," Izuku confirmed, maintaining a respectful demeanor despite the hero's cold assessment. "Show me," Night-Eye challenged, suddenly producing a stamp. "Take this from me within 3 minutes and I'll allow you to participate in this operation." Izuku sensed this was more than a simple test. Night-Eye, with his foresight quirk, was attempting to evaluate not just his abilities, but his future potential. The former sidekick had famously predicted All Might's decline. What was he hoping to see in Izuku? As Night-Eye activated his quirk, Izuku felt something strange. A resistance, as if two forms of future perception were colliding. His own developing future sight, an application of observation haki that showed him potential outcomes, seemed to interfere with Night-Eye's quirk-based prediction. The hero's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Interesting. You're obscured to me." Taking advantage of that momentary distraction, Izuku activated Lightning Soru, moving with such speed that he appeared to teleport. Night-Eye, despite his prediction ability, found himself struggling to track movements that existed outside normal physical limitations. When Izuku finally secured the stamp, doing so precisely at the 3-minute mark, a deliberate choice to demonstrate control rather than just raw speed, Night-Eye studied him with newfound interest. "Your movements," the hero observed. "They're not enhanced by a traditional quirk. They operate on different principles." He adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. "You may indeed be useful for this operation." The investigation into the Shi Hasaikai soon escalated. Intelligence suggested they were using a young girl named Eri as the source for their quirk-erasing drug, extracting something from her body in a process that caused her immense suffering. When Izuku learned this detail, he felt a surge of protective rage that wasn't entirely his own. Another echo of GARP, whose fury toward those who harmed children was legendary in the memories that occasionally surfaced. The raid on the Shi Hasaikai compound was planned with military precision. Multiple hero teams would enter simultaneously, with Night-Eye's group, including Izuku, targeting the underground facility where Eri was likely held. As they breached the compound, however, they discovered the Yakuza were better prepared than anticipated. Kaichisaki, Overhaul, the leader of the organization, used his quirk to reshape the underground passages, separating the hero teams and creating a labyrinthine defense. Night-Eye and the others found themselves diverted and delayed by various Yakuza members, enhanced with temporary quirk amplifications. Izuku, however, had an advantage the villains couldn't have anticipated. Another memory had surfaced during his pre-mission meditation, GARP navigating underground complexes during marine operations, using a combination of observation haki and physical techniques to create his own paths when necessary. Drawing on that experience, Izuku focused his senses beyond normal limitations. He could feel the emotional signatures of everyone in the compound. the determined heroes, the desperate Yakuza, and, most distinctly, the terrified presence of a small child. "Eri," he murmured, orienting himself toward her location. "She's below us, several levels down." Without waiting for authorization, Izuku drew back his fist, infusing it with concentrated armament haki. "Seismic demolition," he announced, the technique's name coming to him from GARP'S memory. The punch connected with the floor, but unlike a normal strike, the force wasn't expended on impact. Instead, it traveled through the structure like a directed earthquake, creating a perfectly cylindrical passage that cut through multiple levels of the compound, bypassing all the redirected pathways Overhaul had created. "A direct route," Izuku explained to his stunned teammates. "We can reach Eri before Overhaul realizes we've bypassed his defenses." Night-Eye, despite his usual stoicism, looked momentarily speechless. "That wasn't in any capability assessment I reviewed. I'm still discovering what I can do," Izuku admitted, already moving toward the newly created passage. They descended rapidly, encountering surprisingly little resistance. Most Yakuza members were positioned along the routes Overhaul expected them to take. When they finally reached the lowest level, they found Mirio Tagada, Lemillion, a third-year student who had separated from his team, already engaged in battle with Overhaul himself. The scene was grim. Mirio, despite his incredible permeation quirk and superior combat training, had been hit with the quirk-erasing bullet. Though still fighting with remarkable skill, he was now doing so as a quirkless hero against one of the most dangerous villains in Japan. And beside Overhaul stood Eri, a small horn-bearing girl whose eyes reflected years of abuse and terror. "More insects," Overhaul observed coldly as the hero team arrived. "You're too late. I've already neutralized your ace." Mirio, despite bleeding from multiple wounds, managed a defiant smile. "They're not too late. They're right on time." Overhaul's response was immediate and horrifying. Touching the ground, he used his quirk to disassemble and reassemble the environment, creating a death trap of spikes and shifting surfaces that separated the hero team once more. Simultaneously, he grabbed Eri, using her as both shield and hostage. "Stay back," he warned, "or I'll disassemble her. I can put her back together, mostly." The threat ignited something primal in Izuku, a protective instinct amplified by GARP'S memories of safeguarding the innocent against overwhelming threats. His observation haki expanded beyond normal limits, showing him not just the present moment, but the optimal path forward with perfect clarity. Using a combination of Storm Geppo and Lightning Soru, Izuku moved in a pattern that appeared random to observers, but was precisely calculated to navigate Overhaul's shifting defenses. The Yakuza leader, despite his analytical mind, found himself unable to predict movements that operated outside normal physical laws. "Impossible," Overhaul muttered, growing increasingly desperate as Izuku closed the distance. "No quirk allows movement like that." In his panic, Overhaul made a fateful decision. Touching both the floor and his own body, he executed his most desperate technique, fusing with one of his loyal followers to create a monstrous amalgamation with enhanced power and multiple limbs capable of unleashing his quirk in all directions simultaneously. "Now die!" the fused entity roared, the entire chamber becoming a death trap of constantly disassembling and reassembling matter. Night-Eye, attempting to protect Eri, was caught in the assault. A spike of reassembled concrete impaled the hero through his torso, a wound that would later prove fatal despite the best medical care. Mirio, already quirkless but still determined, positioned himself as a human shield for Eri, prepared to sacrifice everything to protect her. Neither sacrifice would be necessary. Drawing on the deepest wellspring of GARP'S power he had yet accessed, Izuku executed the technique he had been refining since his breakthrough, Galaxy Impact. But this was no training ground demonstration. This was the real application, the full expression of a power that had reshaped battlefields in another world. His fist, coated in iridescent haki that seemed to distort the light around it, connected with Overhaul's fused form with apocalyptic force. The impact didn't just defeat the villain, it completely overwhelmed his quirk's reconstruction ability. The fusion was instantly undone, the component bodies separated and rendered unconscious by the shockwave that traveled through them. More significantly, the force continued beyond the initial impact, traveling through the compound in a controlled pattern that Izuku somehow instinctively directed. The underground facility's structure was reinforced rather than destroyed, preventing a collapse that would have endangered everyone inside. The precision control, another aspect of GARP'S mastery that was becoming accessible to Izuku, ensured that devastating power served a protective purpose. In the sudden silence that followed, Eri stared at Izuku with wide, disbelieving eyes. Approaching her gently, he knelt to her level. "It's over," he said softly. "No one will hurt you again." As he carefully lifted the traumatized child, cradling her with a gentleness that belied the devastating power he had just displayed, Miria watched with complex emotions playing across his features. "That power," the third-year student said quietly. "Even before I lost my quirk, I never imagined anything like that was possible." Izuku met his gaze steadily. "Different power, same purpose. We're both here to protect her." The Shiha Saikai operation ended with the complete dismantling of the Yakuza group. Overhaul and his key lieutenants were taken into custody, their quirk-erasing drug production halted, and their underground network exposed to authorities. Eri was placed under UA's protection, her unique quirk, the ability to rewind biological states, carefully monitored and gradually understood. For Izuku, however, the aftermath troubling revelations. Sir Night-Eye, in his final hours, shared a vision he had glimpsed despite the interference between his foresight and Izuku's future sight. "I saw fragments," the dying hero whispered. "A war unlike anything we've faced. Devastation on an unimaginable scale. And you, Midoriya, standing at the center of it all, wielding power that shouldn't exist in our world." The prophecy weighed heavily on Izuku as he returned to his regular studies. While Bakugo and Todoroki underwent remedial training to secure their provisional licenses, Izuku was assigned to assist in the program, another recognition of his increasingly apparent mastery. The remedial course took place at a local elementary school where the failed students would need to win over the hearts of difficult children through hero work. What should have been a straightforward assignment became complicated when one of the other participants, Inasa Yoarashi from Shiketsu High, revealed his grudge against Todoroki and by extension, the Endeavor Agency. Watching his classmates struggle with both the interpersonal conflict and the practical challenge of connecting with children, Izuku felt another memory surface: GARP training Marine recruits using overwhelming demonstrations not to intimidate, but to inspire. During a simulated rescue exercise where the elementary students were pretending to be civilians in danger, Izuku implemented this approach. Rather than simply completing the exercise efficiently, he created a display that captured the children's imagination. Using Storm Geppo to create visible air currents that lifted fallen debris, demonstrating Phantom Kamiye by flowing around obstacles that should have been impossible to navigate, combining Tempest Rankyaku with Inasa's Wind Quirk to create spectacular visual effects that delighted the young audience. "Hero work isn't just about power," he explained to Todoroki and Bakugo afterward. "It's about inspiration, making people feel safe and giving them something to believe in." The lesson resonated, particularly with Todoroki, who had been raised with Endeavor's power-focused mentality. By the end of the remedial course, both UA students had secured their provisional licenses and, more importantly, had gained insight into the public-facing aspects of heroism that their combat-oriented training sometimes overlooked. As winter turned to spring, UA prepared for its annual cultural festival, a rare opportunity for enjoyment in a year marked by crisis and conflict. Class 1A decided to perform a concert and dance showcase, with Izuku taking a supporting role that utilized his enhanced agility for aerial performances. The preparation period should have been carefree, but two developments complicated matters. First, Eri, still recovering from her trauma at the Shiha Saikai compound, was invited to attend the festival, placing additional pressure on its success. Second, intelligence reports warned of a potential threat from a streaming villain duo known as Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Unlike previous antagonists, Gentle Criminal wasn't motivated by destruction or ideology, but by fame. He executed flashy, non-lethal crimes designed to attract online viewers, assisted by La Brava's devotion and technical skills. Their target, a prestigious event at Japan's top hero school, aligned perfectly with their brand of performative villainy. On the day of the festival, Izuku's enhanced senses detected the pair attempting to infiltrate campus through a blind spot in the security system. Using Lightning Soru to intercept them before they could trigger any alarms, he confronted Gentle Criminal in the wooded area at the edge of campus. "I'm afraid I can't let you disrupt our festival," Izuku said firmly. "There's a little girl who's been looking forward to this day. Her happiness matters more than your video views." Gentle Criminal, despite his flamboyant persona, proved to be a surprisingly capable opponent. His elasticity quirk, combined with creative application and genuine combat skill, made him unpredictable and difficult to pin down. When La Brava activated her love quirk, temporarily boosting his abilities to professional hero levels, he became genuinely dangerous. Yet against Izuku's evolved techniques, even this enhancement proved insufficient. When Gentle created an elastic aerial platform to gain a mobility advantage, Izuku countered with Storm Geppo, creating air currents that disrupted the elastic field. When the villain attempted to trap him in bouncy air barriers, Izuku used Piercing Shigon to create precise openings in the elastic constructs. The decisive moment came when Gentle, realizing he was outmatched, attempted a desperate final attack, using his enhanced elasticity to turn his entire body into a rebounding projectile aimed at Izuku's center mass. Rather than evade, Izuku activated Crushing Dominance, a grip technique derived from GARP'S memories that could compress steel. When Gentle Criminal rebounded into range, Izuku caught him with one hand, his fingers exerting precisely calculated pressure that instantly neutralized the elastic properties of the villain's quirk without causing permanent injury. "Your technique is impressive," Izuku acknowledged as the defeated villain went limp in his grasp. "But you're using it for the wrong purpose. Someone with your creativity could be helping people instead of chasing online fame." The genuine respect in Izuku's voice reached something in Gentle Criminal that previous defeats had not. As Hound Dog's security team took the villains into custody, the streaming criminal looked back at Izuku with thoughtful reconsideration of his life choices. With the threat neutralized without triggering any alarms, the festival proceeded as planned. Class 1A's performance was a tremendous success, particularly for Eri, who smiled for the first time since her rescue. Watching her joy from backstage, Izuku felt a sense of accomplishment different from his battle victories, a reminder that heroism wasn't measured solely by the enemies defeated, but by the happiness protected. This perspective would be tested sooner than expected. Shortly after the festival, Japan was rocked by the emergence of a new threat: high-end Nomus, artificially enhanced beings with multiple quirks and near-human intelligence. Unlike the mindless weapon from the USJ incident, these were strategic combatants capable of adapting to hero techniques. The first public appearance of a high-end Nomu-targeted endeavor, recently elevated to the #1 hero position following All Might's retirement. The battle, broadcast live across Japan, showed the Flame Hero and his sidekick Hawks fighting desperately against an enemy that seemed designed specifically to counter Endeavor's abilities. Watching the footage from UA's dorms, Izuku felt a chill of recognition. The Nomu's tactical adjustments, its precise counters to Endeavor's techniques. This wasn't just a weapon, but a test, a data-gathering exercise by whoever controlled these creatures. "All for One is gone, but his organization continues," Izuku murmured, another fragment of GARP'S strategic assessment surfacing in his mind. They're probing for weaknesses in the hero system. When the battle shifted to a densely populated area, endangering countless civilians, Izuku made a decision that would later be intensely debated in hero oversight committees. Using his provisional license as authorization, he left campus, technically permissible for emergency response, and moved toward the battle zone at speeds that strained even his enhanced physiology. He arrived to find Endeavor pushed to his limits. The Flame Hero had unleashed his most powerful technique, Prominence Burn, but the high end had partially regenerated and was preparing a counterattack that would endanger the evacuating civilians. Without hesitation, Izuku inserted himself between the Nomu and a collapsing building where rescue operations were still ongoing. Drawing on GARP'S memories of facing regenerating opponents, he analyzed the high-end structure with enhanced perception. Its core is distributed, he realized. Conventional attacks, even Endeavor's flames, can't completely neutralize it because it can transfer its consciousness between different tissue clusters. The solution came from another of GARP'S memories, a technique developed specifically for opponents with distributed vital systems. Concentrating advanced armament haki into his fist, Izuku prepared a galaxy impact variation that would affect not just the point of contact, but the entire target simultaneously. When the high end lunged toward the civilians, Izuku met it with a punch that connected with its center mass but propagated throughout its entire body. The impact created a visible shockwave that temporarily distorted the air, but more importantly, it delivered internal destruction to every part of the Nomu simultaneously, overwhelming its regenerative capabilities and neutralizing all of its distributed cores in a single strike. The creature collapsed, genuinely defeated rather than temporarily disabled. Its advanced regeneration rendered irrelevant by an attack that operated on principles outside its design parameters. Endeavor, struggling to remain standing after exhausting his flames, stared at Izuku with a complex mixture of professional assessment and personal reevaluation. "That technique," the number one hero said, his voice rough from exertion. "What was it?" "Internal destruction," Izuku explained, the knowledge flowing from GARP'S experience. "It bypasses external defenses to affect the target from within." Endeavor's eyes narrowed with analytical focus. "You're the one Shoto talks about, Midoriya, the student with the unclassifiable abilities." Before the conversation could continue, Hawks landed beside them, his feathers significantly depleted from the battle, but his sharp intelligence fully intact. "We've got a situation," the winged hero said quietly, gesturing to the news helicopters circling overhead. "They've been broadcasting everything, including the first-year student who just took down a high-end Nomu with one punch after the number 1 and number 2 heroes were struggling." The public reaction was immediate and intense. While many celebrated the victory, others raised concerns about a system where students needed to intervene in professional-level threats. The Hero Commission, already under scrutiny following All Might's retirement, faced renewed questions about readiness and response protocols. For Izuku, the incident brought both recognition and scrutiny. More pro-heroes sought to understand his abilities. More agencies expressed interest in future internships. More officials monitored his development with cautious attention. But it also cemented his growing reputation, no longer just a promising student, but a hero in training whose power already operated at the highest professional level. This reputation would be tested during UA's next training exercise, joint training between classes 1A and 1B, designed to foster cooperation and healthy competition between the hero course sections. The exercise, structured as a series of team battles, was meant to showcase each student's growth since the sports festival. When Izuku was selected for the final round, facing a 1B team led by Hitoshi Shinso, a general studies student being considered for transfer to the hero course, the matchup was viewed with particular interest. Shinso's brainwashing quirk represented a psychological challenge to Izuku's physical dominance, a test of whether overwhelming power could be neutralized by tactical misdirection. As the match began, Izuku found himself facing an unexpected complication. Attempting to access observation haki to locate opponents, he instead experienced a sudden influx of GARP'S memories. Not the usual helpful fragments, but an overwhelming torrent that temporarily disoriented him. In that moment of vulnerability, Shinso successfully used his brainwashing quirk, taking control of Izuku's conscious actions. To observers, it appeared the undefeated powerhouse had finally encountered a hard counter to his abilities. The reality was more complex. Within Izuku's mind, the flood of memories had created a peculiar state. His conscious self was indeed under Shinso's control, but GARP'S combat instincts operated on a deeper level, independent of normal cognitive processes. Without conscious direction, Izuku's body responded to Shinso's command to walk toward him, but did so using Phantom Kamiye, flowing in a pattern that made him an impossible target for the supporting attacks from 1B students. When Monoma, 1B's copy specialist, attempted to touch Izuku to replicate his abilities, Izuku's body automatically executed a perfect Tempest Rankyaku that created an air blade between them, preventing contact without causing injury. Most surprisingly, even while brainwashed, Izuku's Conqueror's haki manifested unconsciously, not as an overwhelming wave, but as a precision tool that disrupted Shinso's concentration just enough to break the brainwashing effect. Returning to full awareness, Izuku found himself surrounded by 1B students, with Shinso repositioning for another attempt. In that moment, he made a decision that surprised observers. Rather than overwhelming his opponents with superior power, he deliberately limited himself to techniques that showcased tactical application rather than raw force. Using Future Sight to anticipate movements, Lightning Soru for positioning, and Armament Haki for strategic defense, Izuku systematically neutralized each opponent through precision rather than power. When he finally faced Shinso directly, he did so with genuine respect. "Your quirk is formidable," Izuku acknowledged as they engaged in close combat. "It forced me to develop counters I hadn't considered before." The match concluded with Class 1A's victory, but more importantly, it demonstrated Izuku's growing strategic sophistication. He had proven that his abilities weren't just about overwhelming force, but could be applied with surgical precision when the situation demanded restraint. This evolution in his approach didn't go unnoticed. When the time came for another round of work studies, Izuku received an unexpected invitation from the Endeavor Agency, now focusing on team operations that integrated heroes with complementary abilities. Alongside Todoroki and Bakugo, Izuku joined Japan's #1 hero for intensive field training. Endeavor, despite his complicated personal history and initially abrasive manner, proved to be an insightful mentor in professional combat applications. He pushed the students to develop combination techniques that enhanced each other's effectiveness. Bakugo's explosions creating openings for Todoroki's precision ice, Todoroki's fire amplifying Izuku's air pressure techniques. During a patrol in Kyushu, they encountered a situation that tested this team approach. A villain with a quirk that created and controlled tangible darkness, using it to obscure a shopping district while his accomplices robbed stores and terrorized civilians. Endeavor's flames, normally perfect for illumination, proved ineffective against this specialized darkness that absorbed light rather than being dispelled by it. The hero adjusted immediately, switching to infrared perception, but the civilians remained in danger, unable to see escape routes and vulnerable to the accomplices moving freely through the darkness. Drawing on GARP'S memories of naval operations in zero visibility conditions, Izuku developed an immediate solution. Using a precisely controlled application of Conqueror's Haki, not to render opponents unconscious, but to create a detectable presence, he established pressure points throughout the darkness that civilians could sense and navigate toward. Simultaneously, he combined Storm Geppo with Bakugo's explosions, creating air current patterns that disrupted the darkness, quirk's cohesion without endangering the surrounding structures. This created temporary visibility windows that Todoroki used to guide civilians to safety with illuminated ice paths. The coordinated response neutralized the threat with minimal property damage and zero civilian casualties. A textbook professional operation that reflected well on both the students and their mentor. Endeavor, observing the aftermath, offered rare explicit approval. "Your power is remarkable, Midoriya," the flame hero acknowledged. "But more impressive is your tactical integration. You don't just overwhelm problems, you solve them." Coming from Endeavor, whose career had been built on overwhelming force rather than nuanced solutions, the observation carried particular weight. It reflected Izuku's growing influence not just on his peers, but on the professional hero community, subtly shifting combat doctrines through demonstrated effectiveness. This period of professional growth was interrupted by a development that would test Izuku's moral compass as well as his abilities. The emergence of a vigilante calling himself Crawler, whose activities in Naruhata Ward had begun attracting both public support and official concern. Unlike most vigilantes, Crawler operated with unusual discipline and effectiveness, targeting organized crime operations that had escaped official notice. More concerning to authorities was his apparent training. He moved with precision that suggested professional background, possibly even hero course education. When intelligence suggested Crawler might be targeting a major Yakuza gathering, potentially endangering civilians in the crossfire, Izuku was assigned to a task force meant to intercept the vigilante before he could act. The assignment came with uncomfortable subtext. His unique abilities made him ideal for capturing someone who had consistently evaded conventional heroes. Patrolling Naruha at night, Izuku extended his observation haki to its limits, scanning for the emotional signature that would identify someone operating outside the law, but with heroic intent. What he found instead was something unexpected, a familiar presence that he recognized from UA, though not from the hero course. Using Lightning Soru to move across rooftops without being detected, Izuku positioned himself to observe rather than immediately apprehend. What he witnessed confirmed his suspicion. Crawler was Hitoshi Shinso, the general studies student with the brainwashing quirk, operating with equipment that enhances mobility and combat effectiveness despite lacking a physical enhancement quirk. Rather than immediately reporting this discovery, Izuku made a decision that would later be questioned by authorities but defended by All Might himself. He approached Shinso directly, outside the official operation parameters. "You're taking an enormous risk," Izuku said, appearing beside the vigilante on a rooftop overlooking the Yakuza gathering. "Not just legally, but tactically. There are 17 armed criminals in that building." Shinso, to his credit, didn't attempt to flee or deny his identity. "They're trafficking children through false adoption agencies. The official response has been delayed 3 times due to jurisdictional disputes." His voice carried bitter determination. Sometimes the system is too slow. The observation resonated with another of GARP'S memories, situations where bureaucracy had endangered innocent lives, forcing direct action outside normal protocols. But GARP had operated with authority Shinso lacked, and with power that made him effectively unstoppable. "I understand your frustration," Izuku acknowledged, "but getting yourself killed or arrested won't help those children." What followed wasn't a conventional hero-vigilante confrontation, but a negotiation. Using his provisional license as legal cover and his growing reputation as practical leverage, Izuku proposed an alternative. They would document the operation thoroughly, creating evidence that couldn't be bureaucratically dismissed, then coordinate with specific heroes Izuku knew would respond regardless of jurisdictional complications. The compromise satisfied Shinso's moral imperative, while redirecting his actions toward a solution that wouldn't derail his future hero career. Together, they conducted surveillance that provided actionable intelligence, resulting in a coordinated raid that freed the trafficked children and dismantled the operation without a single civilian casualty. Afterward, as professional heroes processed the criminals, Izuku had a final conversation with Shinso before the vigilante disappeared into the night. "Your quirk is perfect for hero work," Izuku noted, "especially covert operations where minimal force is the priority." Shinso studied him with analytical focus. "Yet UA initially rejected me from the hero course because I couldn't break robots in an entrance exam." The criticism was valid. The hero system's emphasis on combat effectiveness often overlooked specialized applications that didn't translate to straightforward battle scenarios. It was another echo of GARP's experience, where the most effective Marines weren't always the most destructive, but those who applied their unique abilities most appropriately to each situation. "The system isn't perfect," Izuku acknowledged, "but we improve it from within, not by circumventing it entirely." The incident, while officially recorded as a successful intelligence operation that prevented vigilante intervention, marked a turning point in Izuku's approach to heroism. He began to see beyond immediate threats to the systemic issues that created environments where villains thrived and vigilantes emerged in response. This perspective would prove valuable sooner than expected. A new international threat emerged in the form of a bioengineered villain from America, Humorize, a terrorist organization that viewed quirks as a disease afflicting humanity. Their leader, Fleck Turn, had developed a weapon called trigger bombs that could catalyze quirk factors to dangerous levels, potentially causing mass casualties among powered individuals. When America's top hero, Star and Stripe, requested international cooperation to counter this threat, Japan's response was complicated by diplomatic considerations and jurisdiction questions. Despite having the world's most powerful quirk, New Order, which could rewrite reality by touching a target and declaring a rule, Star and Stripe found herself constrained by political limitations that delayed effective response. Frustrated by this inaction and concerned about intelligence suggesting trigger bombs had already been smuggled into Japan, Star and Stripe attempted a unilateral operation that brought her into conflict with both Humorize agents and Japanese authorities concerned about unsanctioned foreign hero activity on their soil. The confrontation occurred in Tokyo Bay, where Star and Stripe had tracked a shipment she believed contained trigger bombs. Instead, she found herself facing a trap. Fleck-Turn himself, whose Reflect quirk could bounce back any physical attack, including the effects of her reality-altering new order if improperly applied. As the battle escalated, causing significant damage to port facilities, Japanese heroes were dispatched with conflicting orders. Some instructed to assist the American hero, others to contain the situation and prevent unsanctioned combat in Japanese territory. Izuku, participating in a nearby training exercise with Endeavor's agency, sensed the conflict through his enhanced perception. The chaotic emotional signatures, the distinctive pressure of Star and Stripe's overwhelming quirk, the malevolent focus of Fleck-Turn, all registered clearly despite being kilometers away. "Something's wrong," he informed Endeavor immediately. "International incident at the port. American hero versus unknown combatant with reflection abilities." Endeavor, now experienced with Izuku's perceptive capabilities, didn't question the assessment. "Official response will be delayed by diplomatic protocols. We'll provide reconnaissance only, no engagement without direct authorization." But as they approached the battle zone, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Fleck-Turn had activated multiple trigger bombs, creating a reaction that affected powered individuals throughout the port district. Heroes with physical enhancement, quirks found themselves losing control, their abilities fluctuating dangerously and threatening widespread collateral damage. Star and Stripe, attempting to contain these effects with her new order, made a critical tactical error. By touching affected areas and declaring rules that suppressed quirk factors, she spread her power too thin, creating openings that Fleck-Turn exploited. Using his reflection ability against her overtaxed quirk, he created a feedback loop that threatened to destabilize New Order itself, potentially releasing its reality-altering effects in unpredictable ways that could devastate the entire region. Observing this from the perimeter, Izuku experienced another profound memory integration. GARP facing an opponent with similar reflection abilities, countering not by using more power, but by changing the nature of his attack to something the enemy couldn't reflect. Without waiting for authorization, Izuku moved. Using Lightning Soru to cross the battle zone faster than observers could track, he positioned himself between Star and Stripe and Fleck-Turn just as the villain prepared his finishing move, a reflected New Order effect that would have rewritten the American hero's biology, potentially fatally. What Izuku did next astonished even Endeavor, who had witnessed his incredible abilities firsthand. Rather than attacking Fleck-Turn directly, which would have triggered the reflection quirk, Izuku used Tectonic Force, a technique derived from GARP'S memories that didn't project energy outward, but manipulated the physical environment through precisely applied pressure. The concrete beneath Fleck-Turn suddenly shifted, creating an angled surface that disrupted his footing and orientation. Simultaneously, Izuku used Soul Pressure, a refined application of Conqueror's Haki that affected opponents on a metaphysical level rather than through physical force. Because it wasn't an attack in the conventional sense, but a projection of pure will, it bypassed the reflection quirk entirely. Fleck-Turn, experiencing spiritual pressure that couldn't be reflected, momentarily lost concentration, the critical window Izuku needed. Using Future Sight to identify the optimal approach vector, he executed a perfect Shigan strike to a neural cluster at the base of the villain's skull, neutralizing him without triggering the reflection defense. The immediate threat contained, Izuku turned to the wider problem, the activated trigger bombs still affecting powered individuals throughout the district. Drawing on another fragment of GARP'S memory, he directed Star and Stripe to focus her new order on a single, critical application rather than trying to suppress all effects simultaneously. Target the catalyst compound directly, he instructed with authority that belied his student status. One rule: the chemical ignition component breaks down into harmless elements. That will neutralize all bombs without requiring you to affect each one individually. Star and Stripe, despite being the world's highest-ranked hero, recognized the tactical soundness of the suggestion. Implementing it immediately, she successfully neutralized the trigger bombs without further strain on her quirk, preventing what could have been catastrophic casualties. In the aftermath, as international tensions were carefully navigated through diplomatic channels, Star and Stripe requested a private conversation with Izuku. Away from official oversight, America's top hero studied the young student with professional assessment. "That technique you used," she said directly, "it wasn't physical, but it affected fleck turn anyway. I've never seen anything like it." "Soul pressure," Izuku explained, the knowledge flowing naturally from GARP'S memories. "It operates on principles different from quirks." Star and Stripe's expression turned thoughtful. "There are legends in America too, powers that existed before quirks emerged. Most consider them myths, but some of us have encountered anomalies." The conversation confirmed what Izuku had increasingly suspected. GARP's abilities weren't entirely unique to another world. Similar powers had existed in this world too, perhaps dormant or forgotten as quirks became the dominant paradigm. This realization opened new possibilities for understanding and integrating the marine hero's techniques with modern hero operations. As Izuku's second year at UA progressed, the school faced an internal crisis that would test loyalty and trust more than combat abilities. Intelligence suggested a traitor had been operating within UA since before the USJ incident, providing information to the League of Villains that had facilitated multiple attacks. The investigation, led by Principal Nezu and a specialized team including Aizawa and All Might, proceeded with extreme caution. The implications were serious not just for security, but for morale. The suggestion that someone within UA's trusted community was betraying them cut at the foundation of Hero Society's values. While most students were kept uninformed to prevent panic, Izuku's enhanced perceptive abilities made him increasingly aware that something was wrong. The emotional signatures of the teachers had changed, caution, suspicion, and concern radiating from them during routine interactions. Using observation hockey during quiet moments, he detected surveillance equipment being installed throughout campus, monitoring patterns that suggested internal threat assessment rather than external security. Rather than immediately confronting authorities with his suspicions, Izuku decided to conduct his own investigation. Using a combination of Lightning Soru for undetected movement and Phantom Kamie to avoid security measures, he began observing his classmates and teachers during moments they believed themselves unobserved. What he discovered wasn't what anyone expected. Late one night, he witnessed Yuga Aoyama, his flamboyant laser quirk classmate, sending an encrypted message from a hidden device. Following Aoyama covertly over several days, Izuku pieced together a troubling picture. The French student wasn't acting out of malice but fear, being coerced through threats against his family. More significantly, the entity behind the coercion had a familiar signature, the same malevolent presence Izuku had sensed during the Kamino Ward incident. All for One, though imprisoned, was still exerting influence through proxies and contingency plans established long before his capture. Rather than immediately reporting Aoyama, Izuku made a decision based on GARP'S memories of handling forced collaborators in marine operations. He approached his classmate directly in a location he had verified was free from surveillance. "I know about the messages, Aoyama," he said gently, "and I know you're not doing it willingly." The French student's reaction, instant terror followed by resignation, confirmed everything. "He'll kill them," Aoyama whispered, tears forming. "My parents, he gave me my quirk, and the price is obedience." The revelation that All for One had been directly involved in Aoyama's birth, artificially granting him a quirk that wasn't genetically his, added layers to the conspiracy. It suggested the villain's plans had been in motion for decades, positioning pieces for a long game that was still unfolding despite his imprisonment. With Aoyama's reluctant cooperation, Izuku developed a counter-operation, continuing the information flow but with carefully curated content designed to mislead rather than inform, gradually feeding the League intelligence that would lead them into prepared traps rather than successful operations. When he finally brought the situation to Aizawa and Principal Nezu, it was with a comprehensive plan already developed. one that treated Aoyama as a victim rather than a villain and used the established communication channel as an asset rather than merely neutralizing it. This approach, Principal Nezu observed after reviewing the proposal, shows remarkable strategic sophistication for a student. The balance of counterintelligence value against security risk is professionally calibrated. Aizawa's assessment was more direct. This isn't the work of a second-year student. This is veteran field operation planning. Izuku didn't deny it. I've been accessing more memories. Experience that isn't mine but has become available to me. The counterintelligence operation proceeded according to Izuku's framework, with professional refinements from UA's security team. Over several months, the false information channel successfully misdirected League operations, leading to the capture of several key members and the disruption of multiple attack plans. More importantly, it provided insight into All for One's contingency structure, the network of agents, resources, and fail-safes the master villain had established to continue his work regardless of his personal status. This intelligence would prove crucial in the conflict to come, as the fragments of All for One's organization began coalescing around a new center, Tamura Shigaraki, being systematically transformed into a vessel for All for One's consciousness and power. The final confrontation began with little warning. Multiple crises erupted simultaneously across Japan, prison breaks freeing dangerous villains, Nomu attacks targeting infrastructure, and a coordinated assault on UA itself, now operating as a fortified residential academy for hero students following previous security breaches. What at first appeared to be separate incidents soon revealed itself as a comprehensive strategy, dispersing hero resources to prevent concentrated response against the main objective. Shigaraki, now partially merged with All for One's consciousness, seeking to complete the transfer process by acquiring specific quirks held by UA students. As the school's defenses activated, placing the campus in lockdown mode, Izuku experienced the most complete memory integration yet. Not fragments, but a comprehensive download of GARP'S strategic assessment capabilities, battlefield command experience, and ultimate techniques. In that moment of clarity, he understood the full extent of what he had inherited. GARP hadn't just been a powerful warrior, but a marine hero. Someone who had stood against world-threatening forces with nothing but his trained body and indomitable will, protecting civilization itself from those who would destroy it for personal ambition. As Shigaraki's assault force breached the outer, Izuku took command with an authority that came from somewhere beyond his years. Using observation haki, expanded to its maximum range, he mapped the entire battlefield, every combatant's position, condition, and movement vector becoming clear in his mind. Kachan, Todoroki, Northwest Quadrant, he directed through the emergency communication system. They're using a tunneling quirk to bypass the ground sensors. Yaoyorozu, we need sonic disruptors at these coordinates. Ida, coordinate evacuation of the support course students. They're being specifically targeted for their technical knowledge. The response was immediate and unquestioning. His classmates, even the naturally rebellious Bakugo, recognizing the shift in Izuku's demeanor and responding to the absolute certainty in his voice. This wasn't just their classmate anymore, but someone operating with the tactical precision of a veteran commander. As the battle intensified, Izuku positioned himself at the point of greatest vulnerability, the central approach where Shigaraki himself, accompanied by the League's most powerful members, was focusing his assault. Using Future Sight pushed to new limits, Izuku could see not just immediate possibilities, but complex battle scenarios unfolding across multiple vectors. When Shigaraki finally breached the inner perimeter, the transformation in him was horrifying to behold. His body had been modified beyond human norms, housing multiple quirks that operated in unnatural harmony. More disturbing was his presence, no longer just Shigaraki's destructive hatred, but layered with All for One's calculating malevolence. The two consciousnesses partially merged into something more dangerous than either alone. Midoriya, the hybrid entity, acknowledged, its voice fluctuating between Shigaraki's raspiness and All for One's resonant tone. The anomaly, the one with power that doesn't follow the rules. Izuku's response wasn't words, but action. Drawing on the complete tactical assessment GARP'S memories now provided, He executed a battlefield control strategy that neutralized the supporting villains before they could fully deploy. Using Storm Geppo combined with Conqueror's Haki, he created a pressure differential that disrupted Twice's clone army before it could reach critical mass. With Lightning Soru and Piercing Shigan, he disabled Compress's capsule creation equipment before the villain could implement his capture strategy. Shigaraki, observing these precision counters with All for One's analytical mind, adjusted his approach. Rather than engaging directly, he activated his most dangerous acquired quirk, a reality warping ability that created a localized domain where physical laws could be selectively altered. Within this domain, normal movement became nearly impossible as gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Support structures that should have been solid phased in and out of tangibility. The air itself became selectively permeable to sound and light, creating sensory distortions that would have incapacitated most combatants. For Izuku, however, the environmental manipulation presented an opportunity to implement another of GARP'S legendary techniques, Meteor Storm Fist, a variation of galaxy impact that didn't focus force in a single direction, but radiated it in a controlled pattern throughout an area. Drawing on the deepest wellspring of the marine hero's power, Izuku executed the technique not as a direct attack on Shigaraki, but on the fabric of the distorted domain itself. Each impact, and there were dozens, delivered faster than normal perception could track, created a counter-resonance that stabilized the disrupted physics, gradually neutralizing the reality warp through applied force rather than competing quirk effects. Shigaraki, recognizing the threat to his strategic advantage, abandoned subtlety for a direct assault, using multiple quirks simultaneously, decay spreading through the ground, kinetic boosters enhancing his speed, pain suppressors that exceed normal human limitations. He launched himself at Izuku with killing intent made manifest. What followed wasn't just combat, but a dissertation on the difference between accumulated quirks and integrated mastery. Shigaraki had more raw abilities, more variations, more specific counters. But Izuku operated with perfect harmony between techniques developed over a lifetime of focused training, each movement flowing naturally into the next without the microsecond delays of switching between different power systems. When Shigaraki unleashed Decay in a wide radius attack, Izuku countered with Atmospheric Shattering, a punch so powerful it created a pressure differential that disrupted the spreading effect before it could propagate. When the villain used warped space to appear behind him, Izuku was already moving, Future Sight having shown him the attack vector before Shigaraki himself committed to it. The decisive moment came when Shigaraki, frustrated by his inability to land a significant blow, activated his most dangerous acquisition, a pain amplification quirk that could theoretically incapacitate any opponent regardless of physical durability, transmitting nervous system overload through any physical contact. As the villain closed distance, hands extended to establish the necessary contact, Izuku executed the technique that had been building within him since the integration of GARP'S complete memories. Galaxy Impact Infinite. Unlike the standard Galaxy Impact, which concentrated force in a specific direction, Infinite created a spherical field of pure kinetic energy that expanded outward from the point of initiation. The effect wasn't just physical, but metaphysical, a manifestation of will made so tangible it affected reality itself. When the technique activated, the battlefield went momentarily silent, as if sound itself paused in respect. Then came the impact. Not a thunderclap, but something more fundamental, a distortion visible in the air as space itself seemed to compress and expand in rapid sequence. Shigaraki, caught at the epicenter, experienced something his accumulated quirks couldn't counter. Force applied not from a direction, but from everywhere, simultaneously, affecting every atom of his enhanced body with precisely calibrated pressure that disrupted the harmony between his integrated quirks. The hybrid entity collapsed, its composite consciousness fragmenting as the physical vessel that supported it lost cohesion. The merger between Shigaraki and All for One, incomplete and unstable, began to separate under the metaphysical pressure exerted by Infinite. In that moment of vulnerability, Izuku could have delivered a finishing blow, ended the threat permanently with another application of the devastating technique. But another aspect of GARP'S legacy asserted itself. the understanding that true justice required more than victory, but the possibility of redemption. Using soul pressure, Conqueror's haki refined to surgical precision, Izuku targeted the remaining fragment of Tomura Shigaraki's original consciousness, the abused child who had been systematically corrupted by All for One's influence. Not to destroy, but to isolate, creating a metaphysical barrier between Shigaraki's core identity and All for One's invading consciousness. "You have a choice, Tomura," Izuku said, his voice carrying the authority of GARP'S decades of experience in reaching those considered irredeemable. "Your hatred was cultivated by someone who only wanted to use you. It doesn't have to define you." The words, combined with the soul pressure technique, created a resonance that reached something buried deep within the villain, a fragment of the child who had once wanted to be a hero himself before tragedy and manipulation set him on a darker path. As professional heroes arrived to secure the scene, they found an unexpected tableau. Izuku standing protectively over Shigaraki's unconscious form, maintaining the metaphysical barrier that prevented All for One's consciousness from reasserting control. "He needs specialized containment," Izuku explained to the bewildered response team. "Something that can hold his body while allowing his mind to heal. There's still someone worth saving in there." The Battle of UA, as it would later be called, marked the effective end of All for One's organization. Without its catalyst and strategic center, the coordinated villain operations across Japan collapsed into disorganized individual actions that conventional hero responses could manage. The prison breaks were contained, the Nomu attacks neutralized, and the broader threat to hero society averted. For Izuku, however, the aftermath brought new challenges. The scale of power he had demonstrated. Galaxy impact. Infinite had created seismic readings detectable across the entire country, raised serious questions about oversight and control. Government agencies, hero regulatory bodies, and international observers all sought to understand the nature of his abilities and the implications for existing power structures. More personally, the complete integration of GARP'S memories left Izuku with an identity question he had been avoiding. How much of him was still Izuku Midoriya, and how much was now the reincarnated consciousness of the marine hero? This question found its answer during a private conversation with All Might, who had witnessed the battle's conclusion from the command center. Young Midoriya, the former symbol of peace, began, his gaunt form somehow diminished further by recent events. "That power you displayed, it wasn't just technique, was it? It was something more fundamental." Izuku nodded slowly. "I remember everything now. Not just fragments, but his entire life. Garp the Fist, marine hero, protector of a world different from ours but facing similar threats. His battles, his triumphs, his failures, they're all part of me now." All Might's expression turned thoughtful. "And does that mean Izuku Midoriya no longer exists?" The question struck at the heart of Izuku's concern. He considered it carefully before responding. "I think that's the wrong framework," he said, finally. "It's not replacement, but integration. GARP'S experiences inform me, his techniques flow through me, but the choices remain mine. His power serves my purpose, not the other way around." As if to confirm this understanding, he felt a final memory surface, not a battle technique or strategic assessment, but GARP'S own reflection near the end of his life. The marine hero, contemplating his legacy, had wondered if his power and experience might somehow continue beyond him, finding expression through someone who would use them with the pure heart he had sometimes compromised in service to imperfect institutions. In that memory was approval, not of perfect emulation, but of transcendence, of taking what was valuable from the past and applying it to new challenges with fresh perspective. "I am Izuku Midoriya," he stated with quiet certainty, "enhanced by GARP'S legacy but not defined by it." All Might smiled, relief evident in his expression. "That's what makes you a true hero, my boy. Not the power, but the heart that guides it." In the months that followed, Hero Society underwent significant restructuring. The events at UA had exposed fundamental vulnerabilities in existing systems, not just security protocols, but philosophical approaches to power, training, and social integration of quirks. Izuku, now recognized not just as an exceptional student, but as a strategic voice in hero operations, found himself involved in these discussions at levels unusual for someone his age. His perspectives, informed by GARP'S experiences with different institutional structures, provided valuable alternatives to frameworks that had gone unquestioned for generations. When he officially began his third year at UA, it was with a modified curriculum that acknowledged his advanced capabilities while focusing on areas where he still had room to grow, particularly the public communication aspects of heroism that would be essential for someone whose power operated at his level. During this period of relative peace, Izuku devoted significant time to helping his classmates integrate aspects of GARP'S training methods that didn't require his specific inherited abilities. Bakugo's explosions gained new precision through adapted Rankyaku principles. Uraraka's zero-gravity effects became more tactically versatile through Geppo-inspired applications. Todoroki's temperature control developed finer calibration through meditation techniques derived from haki cultivation. The result was a graduating class unlike any UA had produced, not just individual talents, but a coordinated unit whose abilities complemented each other with unprecedented synergy, capable of handling crisis response with professional-level effectiveness before they had even received their hero licenses. As graduation approached, Izuku faced the question that had always defined his journey. What kind of hero would he become? With power that exceeded even All Might at his peak, operating on principles outside conventional quirk limitations, how would he integrate into a system designed around different assumptions? The answer came during a conversation with Eri, now a student in UA's general education program, her once uncontrollable, rewind quirk, now carefully managed through training Izuku had helped develop. "When you saved me," she said during one of their regular mentoring sessions, "you weren't scary, even though you were so strong. You were safe, like knowing there's someone who can fix anything, no matter how bad it gets." The observation crystallized something Izuku had been considering since fully integrating GARP'S memories. The most valuable aspect of overwhelming power wasn't its capacity for destruction, but the security it created through deterrence. All Might had understood this, creating peace through the certainty that no villain could prevail against him. With this clarity, Izuku made his decision. Rather than joining an established agency after graduation, he would create something new, a rapid response unit specialized in threats that exceeded conventional hero capabilities, operating with international authorization rather than being limited by national jurisdictions. The hero name he registered reflected this mission and honored both aspects of his identity. Deku, Marine Hero, accessible and approachable like the nickname his friends had reclaimed from its bullying origins, but paired with the title that acknowledged the legacy he carried. His hero costume, refined through multiple iterations, found its final form, a blend of modern support technology with design elements that subtly echoed Marine formal wear, practical for combat but carrying symbolic weight that communicated authority and tradition. In the years that followed his graduation, Izuku's impact on hero society transcended conventional metrics. Crime statistics told part of the story, villain activities requiring his direct intervention becoming increasingly rare as the certainty of defeat deterred all but the most delusional from attempting large-scale operations. More significant was the cultural shift. The public's relationship with heroes evolved from dependency to partnership, civilians increasingly empowered with training and systems developed from GARP'S experiences with citizen response protocols in crisis situations. Hero education itself was transformed, incorporating elements of Izuku's integrated training methodology that emphasized fundamental physical mastery alongside quirk development. International cooperation reached unprecedented levels, with Izuku's rapid response unit serving as a model for cross-jurisdictional operations that address threats without becoming entangled in political complications. His friendship with Star and Stripe expanded into a global network of top heroes who could coordinate seamlessly when civilization-level threats emerged. Perhaps most meaningful was his continued mentorship of younger heroes, particularly those from backgrounds similar to his own, children born without quirks or with abilities considered impractical for conventional hero work. Through his example and direct teaching, he created pathways for those who might otherwise have been excluded from hero society entirely. 10 years after the Battle of UA, at a ceremony commemorating the anniversary of All Might's retirement, Izuku found himself standing before the assembled hero community as the keynote speaker. Looking out at faces that included his former classmates, now established pros with their own agencies and specialties, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. "When I was diagnosed as Quirkless," he began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had become his hallmark, "I was told to abandon my dream of becoming a hero. It was considered impossible without some special power granted by genetics or chance." A smile touched his features as he continued. "What I discovered instead was something more fundamental, that heroism isn't defined by the abilities we possess, but by how we choose to use whatever strengths we have. That determination, properly channeled, can itself become a power beyond conventional understanding." He gestured to the diverse assembly before him, heroes whose quirks ranged from the spectacularly powerful to the seemingly mundane, all finding their place in a system that had expanded to recognize different forms of contribution. "The legacy I hope to leave isn't about strength that overwhelms problems through force. It's about strength that creates space for everyone to contribute their unique gifts to our shared security and prosperity." As he concluded his address, Izuku felt a final sense of integration, not just between himself and GARP'S legacy, but between his childhood dream and his adult reality. He had become something neither he nor his benefactor could have envisioned alone. A hero who carried the power of one world and the heart of another, creating something new that honored both while transcending their limitations. The little boy who had once cried at being told his dream was impossible now stood as living proof that determination, when fueled by genuine desire to protect others, could itself become a force that reshapes reality. Just as GARP had been the fist of justice in his world, Izuku had become the inheritor and evolution of that legacy in his own, not through mere emulation, but through the courage to make that power truly his. In the final analysis, the greatest technique Izuku had mastered wasn't Galaxy Impact or Conqueror's Haki or any other combat application. It was the ability to take power that could have corrupted or consumed him, and instead channel it toward its highest purpose, not the defeat of villains, but the creation of a world where villainy itself became increasingly unnecessary, displaced by systems and relationships that addressed its root causes. That, more than any battle won or enemy defeated, was the true measure of what it meant to be the world's greatest hero.
When reality breaks under your fist, when mountains bow to your will, when your presence alone ends wars, that's when the world learns. All Might was just the opening act. Galaxy Impact Infinite isn't just a technique. It's a promise that evil will never win again. That would be all. See you in the next one.